Chapter 781, Sword 13. Even if it were second-rate powers in the foreign lands, they would more or less possess one or two martial monarch stage experts. Perhaps the Skywolf Fort was a local tyrant at the border of the foreign lands. But in the entire foreign lands, it could only be considered to be a third-rate power. It was even to the extent that it was even inferior to many third-rate powers at the central area of the foreign lands. Even second-rate powers of the foreign lands would fight for the sake of a Grade 2 alchemist. So there were very few Grade 2 alchemists that would willingly lower themselves to a third-rate power like the Skywolf Fort. After all, no one wouldn't hope to move to a higher position. If a Grade 2 alchemist was willing to join Skywolf Fort, the Skywolf Fort would utterly not refuse, nor did it have any reason to refuse. I've really been thinking in such a limited way, to the point I actually forgot this. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly in his heart. At the critical moment, he'd actually forgotten that he was already a Grade 2 alchemist and Grade 2 weapons craftsman. No matter if it was Feng Wei or Dongguo Lei, they weren't surprised when they saw Duan Lingtian take out a Grade 3 life recovery pill. Not to mention the Skywolf Fort possessed many Grade 3 alchemists, even the Dongguo clan had one. So long as one possessed sufficient origin stones, one was completely capable of easily buying many Grade 3 medicinal pills in ancient desert city, and they included the Grade 3 life recovery pill that Duan Lingtian had given Feng Wudao earlier. Vice Fort Master Feng, looks like this Duan Lingtian is really turning a deaf ear to your words. Why don't I make a move myself and take him with me? Vice Fort Master Feng, you can be at ease. I'll absolutely not allow your Skywolf Fort to be tainted with a trace of blood. Dongguo Lei looked at Feng Wei with a reverent gaze and was awaiting Feng Wei's reply. He didn't dare act on his own before Feng Wei. In the end, Feng Wei nodded. Dongguo Lei started smiling when he saw Feng Wei nod. Zishang started smiling, Zhao Weiyi started smiling. Everyone that wished for nothing more than for Duan Lingtian to be struck with misfortune were smiling. Including Feng Wudao, Feng Tianwu, and Zhang Shouyang, all the people that were concerned about Duan Lingtian held grim expressions, and their expressions were as unsightly could be. Whoosh! Dongguo Lei flew out and flashed directly at Duan Lingtian. Feng Wudao appeared once more before Duan Lingtian and protected Duan Lingtian behind him. HMPH. A mere 4th-level void transformation stage martial artist dares be presumptuous before this patriarch. You're courting death. Dongguo Lei grunted angrily as the origin energy on his body swept out. Instantly, the energy of the heaven and earth roiled in the sky above him before converging into the phenomenon of the heavens and the earth. Whoosh! 800 ancient horned dragon silhouettes instantly condensed into form, and they dashed out alongside him with an imposing aura that shot into the sky like a rainbow. 6th level of the void transformation stage. Many people went pale. In the entire foreign lands, the Dongguo clan was only a power that couldn't be rated in the foreign lands, yet the patriarch of a power like this actually possessed such a terrifying cultivation, and it was truly shocking. Such strength was completely capable of sweeping through the 10 dynasties. As expected of the foreign lands that caused people of the 10 dynasties to pale just from mentioning it. It was indeed far from something that the 10 dynasties who occupied a remote place could compare to. Even a clan that couldn't even be rated in the foreign lands had the strength to sweep through the 10 dynasties. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he intended to directly voice out his identity as a Grade 2 alchemist. Yet right at this moment, Duan Lingtian was stunned. It wasn't only Duan Lingtian, even Feng Wudao and the other people present were stunned as well. They felt their scalps go numb as they looked at the scene that had suddenly occurred before them. Dongguo Lei, who was pouncing at Feng Wudao in full fury, was still on the way when his arm was severed at the shoulder and fresh blood that was dazzling and resplendent sprayed out. From the beginning until the end, all the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties, including Duan Lingtian, didn't notice that anything was amiss. Suddenly, Dongguo Lei's arm was severed. As for Feng Wudao and the others, they had clearly had a brief howl of a sword instead, and because the duration the sword howl appeared was too short, if it wasn't for their strength being extraordinary, they would be utterly incapable of hearing it. The body of Dongguo Lei, who had his arm severed, shook, and he revealed a pained expression, yet forcefully endured it and didn't make a sound. He grabbed his severed arm hurriedly and tightly pressed it onto the place his arm was severed, and then his origin energy flickered with the intention of connecting his severed arm. At the same time, he couldn't help but raise his head to look up high into the sky with an expression that was filled with terror. Earlier, he'd faintly caught that sword light that descended from the sky and severed his arm. The strength of the person was so strong that it was absolutely in existence at the 7th level of the void transformation stage or above. He utterly couldn't afford to offend an existence like this. So from the beginning until the end, he didn't dare make a sound as he was deeply afraid of annoying that expert that was concealed in the shadows. Damn it, that expert wouldn't be helping Duan Lingtian, right? Dongguo Lei's expression was extremely unsightly. His greatest worry right now was that the expert was helping Duan Lingtian, as if it was like this, it would undoubtedly be more difficult than ascending the heavens for him to kill Duan Lingtian. Dongguo Lei took a deep breath and looked at Feng Wei, as he knew that Feng Wei would absolutely not let off the experts that were concealed in the shadows so easily. Now, he only hoped that Feng Wei would be able to drag out and kill that expert. In this way, that bit of worry of his would vanish like mist and smoke. The calm expression of Feng Wei had finally changed. However, his gaze wasn't looking high up in the sky, but it was instead looking at the herbaceous peony pavilion that was beneath Duan Lingtian. Feng Wei, long time no see. Under numerous focused gazes, a robust middle-aged man suddenly flashed out from within the herbaceous peony pavilion. After a short moment, the middle-aged man vanished before the eyes of most people, and when he appeared once more, he was already by Su Li's side. Master. Su Li couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw the appearance of the robust middle-aged man. Earlier, even though his heart burned with anxiety when Duan Lingtian was facing a crisis, yet he didn't take useless action, and he instead contacted his master endlessly. Because he knew that unless his master stood out, otherwise, even if everyone from the Darken dynasty sought to protect Duan Lingtian, it would be impossible for Duan Lingtian to survive. It was he who severed the arm of the Dongguo clan's patriarch. This expert severed the Dongguo clan's patriarch's arm so easily. I presume he's at least in existence at the 7th level of the void transformation stage or above. In this way, his strength isn't inferior to Vice Fort Master Feng. He's the master of that young genius from the Darken dynasty that has come to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. That young man is standing by Duan Lingtian's side and seemed to be a friend of Duan Lingtian's. The members of the 10 dynasties whispered in discussion. The scene before them had taken another twist, causing them to be dazed as their feelings rose and fell, and they were unable to calm down for a long time. Su Li's master. Zi Shang's expression went grim. No matter what, he'd never imagined that Su Li's master would actually be an expert at the 7th level of the void transformation stage or above and would make an appearance at a time like this. Duan Lingtian was just about to be taken away by Dongguo Lei, and the interference of Su Li's master had caused Zi Shang's heart to be filled with a disgruntled feeling. Now he only hoped that Feng Wei, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, would be capable of suppressing Su Li's master. On the other hand, the expressions of those people that wished for nothing more than for Duan Lingtian to die had exceedingly unsightly expressions. Only a little bit more and Duan Lingtian would have died. All of them felt extremely regretful. On the other side, besides Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, and Long Yun, everyone from the Darken dynasty, including Feng Wudao, were shocked by Su Li's master's strength. He was still in the pavilion yet was able to condense a sword from a distance and sever the arm of the Dongguo clan's patriarch. How formidable an ability was this? The Dongguo clan's patriarch was in existence at the 6th level of the void transformation stage at any rate. Even a 7th level void transformation stage expert probably might not be able to possess such a formidable strength, right? Senior, Duan Lingtian looked at Su Li's master with a surprised expression. Even though he'd always known that Su Li's master was present, because he didn't know Su Li's master's strength clearly, so he didn't know if Su Li's master would be able to save him from the hands of this Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master. Now when Su Li's master made a move overbearingly and severed the arm of the Dongguo clan's patriarch, it allowed him to see the light of hope. Even though he'd already had a method to deal with it, doing that would undoubtedly cause him to have to work for the Skywolf Fort. Although he was mentally prepared, his heart was still filled with unwillingness. Working for a power that had once wanted to deliver one to one's death was something that he believed no one would do willingly. Thank you, Senior. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and bowed as he thanked Su Li's master. He'd seen Su Li's master twice, and Su Li's master had saved his life twice. He felt respect that came from the bottom of his heart towards an existence like this. Su Li's master nodded, and then he looked at Feng Wei with a gaze that was like a sword. Sword 13. Feng Wei's expression was extremely ominous, and he said angrily, "When has it been your place to interfere in how my Skywolf Fort does things?" Even though Feng Wei was enraged, yet he didn't have the slightest intention to make a move. It was even to the extent that a trace of fear was faintly mixed within the depths of his gaze. Obviously, he was afraid of the strength of Su Li's master, Sword 13. Sword 13, a formidable sword cultivator of Blade Sect, and the second-ranked expert in the House of Swords in Blade Sect. Many years ago, Feng Wei had fought Sword 13 once, and in a single move, he'd lost at Sword 13's hands. The Blade Sect was a power of the foreign lands that was on par with Skywolf Fort. But even if he knew he wasn't a match for Sword 13, Feng Wei wasn't the slightest bit afraid. After all, this was the Skywolf Fort and not the Blade Sect. Not to mention his strength could only be ranked slightly below average amongst the 5 vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, there was still another fort master that was the most formidable in Skywolf Fort. I naturally can't be bothered to care about your Skywolf Fort's things, but this little brother is the friend of my closed-door disciple. It's fine if I wasn't present, but since I am, I'm truly afraid this disciple of mine wouldn't acknowledge me as his master if I stood idly by. Sword 13 said indifferently, besides that, do you think I don't know the purpose your Skywolf Fort is holding this martial competition of the 10 dynasties? I'll just tell you right now, our Blade Sect wants half of the young experts that become eminent in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Sword 13 finished speaking in a single breath, and his words were filled with an indisputable tone. Sword 13, you, don't go too far. Feng Wei's face darkened, and he was extremely furious. 781 Chapter 782, House of Swords Elder. Going too far? Sword 13 started laughing. Feng Wei, this isn't my own decision but the decision of our entire Blade Sect. Of course, our Blade Sect won't take advantage of your Skywolf Fort for nothing. According to my knowledge, besides our Blade Sect, those baldies know about your Skywolf Fort grandly holding the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Do you want our Blade Sect to cooperate with them? Or do you want our Blade Sect to cooperate with Skywolf Fort? Sword 13 finished speaking in a single breath. Because of what Sword 13 said, the angry expression of Feng Wei's face vanished like the clouds and mist, and it was replaced with an ominous expression. Never had he imagined that this matter would actually be found out by those nasty baldies. Since you're the friend of Sword 13's closed-door disciple, then we'll drop this matter here. Feng Wei glanced indifferently at Duan Lingtian as he spoke. Feng Wei's words caused the expression of Dongguo Lei who stood nearby to go grim, and he said hurriedly. Vice Fort Master Feng, you promised me, you can't. Dongguo Lei was anxious when he saw Feng Wei wanted to go back on his words. HMPH, is it your place to interfere with what decision I, Feng Wei, make? You can leave, I'll return that favor to you sooner or later. Dongguo Lei's words were like a fuse that completely ignited Feng Wei's rage, and it caused Feng Wei's face to seem to be covered in a layer of ice. Dongguo Lei's expression went grim when he heard Feng Wei. Never had he imagined that this dignified vice fort master of Skywolf Fort would go back on his word on a whim. Of course, he knew clearly in his heart that even if Feng Wei went back on his word, he was helpless against Feng Wei, because he was utterly not a match for Feng Wei. Dongguo Lei took a deep breath and glared fiercely at Duan Lingtian, and he left a voice transmission before leaving. Duan Lingtian, you're lucky today to have escaped calamity, but having good luck for now doesn't mean that your luck will be so good for your entire lifetime. This was the voice transmission Dongguo Lei sent into Duan Lingtian's ears before he left, and his words were filled with threats and displayed his resolutions. So long as he was able to take revenge for his grandson, he was willing to pay any price besides his own life. Even if Duan Lingtian had Sword 13 as his backing, Dongguo Lei didn't care, and so long as he found an opportunity, he would kill Duan Lingtian at the first possible moment. After killing Duan Lingtian, he would flee far away from ancient desert city, and it was even to the extent that he didn't care if Sword 13 vented his rage on the Dongguo clan. If it wasn't for him having the certainty of being able to make Feng Wei help him deal with Duan Lingtian when he came to Skywolf Fort this time, he would have killed Duan Lingtian privately long ago. But never had he imagined that even if Feng Wei helped him for the sake of returning the favor, he was still unable to kill Duan Lingtian in the end. Sword 13 that appeared out of nowhere had completely disrupted his plans. When facing Dongguo Lei's threats, Duan Lingtian didn't care and seemed as if he'd utterly not heard Dongguo Lei's voice transmission. After Dongguo Lei left, Feng Wei swept Sword 13 with a cold and indifferent gaze before leaving. For a time, the gazes of the representatives and young geniuses of the 10 dynasties descended onto Sword 13. Based on what was said earlier, he seems to be from the Blade Sect. In terms of strength, the Blade Sect is surely not inferior to Skywolf Fort. Aren't you talking nonsense? If it wasn't for that, would that Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master make a concession? I wonder what the words they spoke earlier meant. Many people whispered in discussion. Especially the members of the Darken Dynasty. Besides Duan Lingtian and Long Yun, all of them looked at Sword 13 with a slightly dumbstruck expression. Even though Feng Tianwu had seen Sword 13 kill in the Ice Flame Pavilion of the Darming Dynasty, she never imagined that Sword 13's strength would actually be so terrifying and even far surpass her father. An expert at the 7th level of the Void Transformation stage or above. Moreover, he seemed to not simply be a 7th level Void Transformation stage expert. In other words, it was extremely likely that Sword 13 was a formidable existence at the 8th level of the Void Transformation stage or even the 9th level of the Void Transformation stage. Sword 13 was completely indifferent to all these gazes, and he slightly raised his head to look at Duan Lingtian before smiling. Duan Lingtian, you're really good at causing trouble. If Su Li was like you, I'm afraid I'd have broken his legs long ago. Even though Sword 13 spoke like this, Duan Lingtian was instead able to clearly notice that when Sword 13 mentioned Su Li, his eyes were filled with a smiling expression. Obviously, Sword 13 extremely favored his closed-door disciple, Su Li. Su Li smiled embarrassedly when he heard this. No matter if it was most of the young geniuses from the Darken Dynasty or the young geniuses from the other 9 dynasties, all of them looked at Su Li with gazes that were filled with envy. They envied Su Li for having such a formidable master and such strong backing. With backing like this, not to mention the ancient desert city, so long as Su Li didn't offend the Fort Master and Vice Fort Masters of Skywolf Fort, it was more than enough for him to move around unhindered. Damn it, just a little bit more. Zishang's expression was extremely unsightly, and his heart was filled with a disgruntled feeling. Earlier, he couldn't help but feel excited when he saw the Dongguo clan's patriarch, Dongguo Lei, was about to take Duan Lingtian away. But right at that critical moment, Sword 13's appearance had caused everything to go up in smoke. This was difficult for him to accept. Once I have sufficient strength, the first person I kill will be this Sword 13. Zishang's eyes flickered with a fierce light as he looked at Sword 13. Whoosh! Zishang was the first to leave, and he returned to the pavilion he stayed at. Just a little bit more. Those people that wished for nothing more than for misfortune to befall Duan Lingtian, like Zhao Weiyi, similarly felt disgruntled. The people at the scene dispersed gradually. Not long after, only the group of people from the Darken Dynasty remained in the sky. Su Li, aren't you going to introduce us? The Darken Dynasty's emperor looked at Su Li and lightly smiled as he asked. Obviously, the emperor of the Darken Dynasty wanted to get acquainted with Su Li's master, Sword 13, through him. Even though he didn't know what the blade sect that Sword 13 mentioned was, but as the emperor of the Darken Dynasty, his thoughts were sharp and could easily discern that the Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master, Feng Wei, was rather afraid of Sword 13 and the blade sect behind Sword 13. He could know from this that the Blade Sect was probably not inferior to Skywolf Fort. Originally, as far as the Emperor was concerned, Su Li was from his Darken Dynasty no matter what, and Su Li had to give him face and introduce the mysterious Sword 13 to him. But he was doomed to be thinking too much. In next to no time, his expression became extremely unsightly. Am I very familiar with you? Su Li glanced indifferently at the Emperor, and then he called out to Duan Lingtian, Feng Wudao, Feng Tianwu, and Zhang Shouyang before returning to the herbaceous peony pavilion with Sword 13. The expression of the Darken Dynasty's emperor was as unsightly as could be as he gazed at the figures of Duan Lingtian and the others that were disappearing into the distance. However, even though he was enraged, he didn't dare let it show. What a joke! If Su Li's master, that expert called Sword 13, wanted to deal with him, Sword 13 would probably only need a single strike to kill him. As for Bai He, Bai Hao, and Zishang's master, Bai Nanyin, all of them were silent and speechless. They felt a wave of powerlessness before an expert like that. Duan Lingtian and the others followed Su Li to enter the herbaceous peony pavilion, and then Su Li introduced his master to Duan Lingtian and the others in a spacious room. Sword 13, an expert in the Blade Sect. The Blade Sect was a power of the foreign lands that wasn't inferior to the Skywolf Fort, and practically all its disciples were martial artists that utilized swords or sabers, so they were further divided into the House of Sabers and the House of Swords. Sword 13 was the Vice Sect Master of Blade Sect. After Su Li introduced Duan Lingtian and the others to Sword 13 nodded and squeezed out a trace of a rare smile. You're really not bad. If you're willing, I can make an exception and allow you to enter the Blade Sect and become an elder of the House of Swords in our Blade Sect. Sword 13 looked at Feng Wudao. Obviously, he was rather shocked by an extraordinary genius in the martial Dao like Feng Wudao had come from the Darken dynasty. He was extremely clear about the cultivation environment in the 10 dynasties. It was extremely rare that Feng Wudao was capable of breaking through to the 4th level of the void transformation stage before the age of 50 while under the adverse cultivation environment in the 10 dynasties. Feng Wudao's eyes lit up when he heard Sword 13, and he emitted strong battle intent. Are they many experts at the 4th level of the void transformation stage or above in the Blade Sect? Of course. Sword 13 nodded. There are no less than 7 people at the 7th level of the void transformation stage of above in our Blade Sect. As for people at the 4th level of the void transformation stage to the 6th level of the void transformation stage, there's more than 20 people. I'm willing to join the Blade Sect. Feng Wudao smiled lightly. He was addicted to the martial Dao in his entire lifetime, and he liked to challenge experts and break through his limitations in the line between life and death. Besides his natural talent, his current accomplishments were mostly because of this. Now when he heard Sword 13 say there were many existences at the 4th level of the void transformation stage or above in Blade Sect, Feng Wudao was moved. Once he entered Blade Sect, then wouldn't he have many opponents to train with? Very good. Sword 13 nodded once more when he heard Feng Wudao agree. Since you're willing to become an elder of our Blade Sect's House of Swords, return to the Blade Sect with me after the martial competition of the 10 dynasties ends. Feng Wudao nodded. Congratulations, Uncle Feng. Duan Lingtian congratulated Feng Wudao. To Feng Wudao, joining the Blade Sect was undoubtedly a great turning point in his life. Duan Lingtian believed that with Feng Wudao's natural talent and ability, once he arrived at the Blade Sect, he would surely yield unusually brilliant results and even have the chance to become one of the few experts of the Blade Sect. With the memories of the rebirth martial emperor in his mind, he felt he was capable of discerning the ability of people accurately. As far as he was concerned, perhaps Sword 13 was stronger than Feng Wudao now, but it might not be the case in the future. Because Feng Wudao possessed the potential to become an expert. Perhaps, Uncle Feng has the chance to become a martial monarch stage expert. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Congratulations, father. Congratulations, Uncle Feng. After Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang congratulated Feng Wudao. 782 Chapter 783, Sanguinary Competition. In next to no time, Feng Wudao and Sword 13 left Su Li's room successively. Only Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, Zhang Shouyang, and Su Li remained in the room. The gazes of Duan Lingtian's group of 3 descended simultaneously onto Su Li. They had too many questions in their hearts that urgently required Su Li's answers. Su Li, Sr. said earlier that the Blade Sect wants half of the young experts that become eminent in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. What did he mean by that? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. He kept having the feeling that when Sword 13 said those words, it was absolutely not simply that the Blade Sect wanted to compete for disciples with Skywolf Fort. I don't know either. Su Li laughed bitterly. I only know that Master asked me to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, and he would take me back to Blade Sect once the martial competition ended. Even though Su Li had become the disciple of Sword 13 for a period of time already, he'd never returned to the Blade Sect with Sword 13. Then what about the Baldies your master mentioned earlier? Why did it cause the expression of Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master to darken? Are those Baldies so terrifying? Feng Tianwu asked. Actually, I'm not really clear about those Baldies either. I've only heard Master mention that those Baldies represent a power of the foreign lands that isn't inferior to our Blade Sect. Su Li spoke with slight helplessness as what he knew was too little. We can be sure that there's surely a reason why the Skywolf Fort held this martial competition of the 10 dynasties suddenly. Moreover, that reason caused the Blade Sect and another power of the foreign lands that isn't inferior to the Blade Sect to pay attention to it. Zhang Shouyang guessed. His guess obtained the unanimous agreement of Duan Lingtian's group of 3. Right, Su Li, why is your master called Sword 13? It's probably not his real name, right? Feng Tianwu asked curiously. Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang looked at Su Li as well, and they had the same question in their hearts. Sword 13 didn't seem like a regular name, and it seemed more like a code name. I know the answer to this. Su Li said, because I've asked Master this question once. According to Master, there's a tradition in our Blade sect. The Master of the House of Blades and House of Swords in the Blade sect had to be chosen from an extremely horrifying selection. Moreover, a selection like that would be held every 30 years. During that selections, no matter if it was the House of Sabers or House of Swords, both of them would carefully select 18 outstanding disciples that had the intention of becoming the sect master. From the moment these outstanding disciples of the House of Sabers agreed to undergo the selection, their past names would cease to exist, and only a new name would remain. It would respectfully be Saber 1, Saber 2, Saber 3, until Saber 18. As he spoke up to hear, Su Li paused for a moment. For example, Long Yun's master is precisely Saber 5 of the current generations, and in another few years, he'll officially take over as master of the House of Sabers in the Blade sect. Su Li looked at Duan Lingtian as he spoke. Long Yun's master. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he was slightly surprised. He was naturally familiar with Long Yun. The Saber young master of the formed 5 great young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom and the foster son of the demonic Lotus Blade sect's leader, Long Wei, and Long Yun could be considered to be half an enemy to him. Of course, after he killed Long Wei, they could already be considered to be true enemies. Once Long Yun found out that he'd killed Long Wei, Long Yun would surely wish for nothing more than to fight him to the death. Originally, after he crushed Long Yun in the martial competition of the 5 great sect of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, Duan Lingtian had never taken Long Yun seriously any longer. Because he felt that Long Yun would be left far behind by him and was nothing to be feared. Only when the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom held the genius competition and he saw Long Yun once more was he unable to refrain but be greatly shocked. At that time, Long Yun seemed as if he'd been reborn, and a tremendous change had occurred on him. Even though Long Yun was still inferior to him, he wasn't much inferior to him. Later on, he'd obtained fortuitous encounters in succession, allowing his strength to advance by leaps and bounds, whereas, Long Yun's strength still followed neither swiftly nor slowly behind him, and this caused him to be filled with admiration towards the fortuitous encounter behind Long Yun. According to his knowledge, Long Yun's fortuitous encounter was similar to Su Li's, and both of them had a master that came from the foreign lands. Moreover, their masters were from the same sect. Su Li called Long Yun's master as Martial Uncle Saber, and Long Yun called Su Li's master as Martial Uncle Sword. At that time, Duan Lingtian was slightly puzzled when they addressed their masters in that way. Do people address their seniors like that? Now he came to an understanding. One was called Saber 5, the other was called Sword 13, how else would they address them? So in this way, your master is representing the Blade sect's master? Duan Lingtian asked. Yes. Su Li nodded. Long Yun's master, Saber 5, is the one and only disciple amongst the 18 disciples from the House of Sabers that passed through the selection and survived. The other 17 House of Sabers disciples are dead. It can be said that Saber 5 stepped on the corpses of those 17 House of Sabers disciples to possess his current status and accomplishments. As he finished speaking, Su Li couldn't help but sigh. Duan Lingtian naturally knew why Su Li was sighing. Because Su Li's master, Sword 13, was the same, he'd stepped on the corpses of the 17 disciples from the House of Swords to be able to become the inheritor of the House of Swords. Your Blade sect is truly terrifying. My father won't face any danger from joining the Blade sect, right? When she heard of the tradition to compete for position in the Blade sect, Feng Tianwu's beautiful face went pale and she asked with slight fear. Of course not. Su Li laughed bitterly. It's only the competition for the position as master in the House of Swords and House of Sabers that's comparatively tragic. Normally, the disciples of the House of Sabers are harmonious with each other. Moreover, the House of Swords is almost the same as well. The disciples of the House of Sabers are harmonious with each other. The disciples of the House of Swords are almost the same. Zhang Shouyang smiled spuriously. Based on what you said, there seemed to be something wrong between the disciples of the House of Swords and House of Sabers. Actually, there's nothing wrong, according to my master, it's just that both are unconvinced of each other's strength, so there would occasionally be some competition and friction between both sides. Su Li spoke with slight embarrassment. He'd found out slightly about the situation in Blade sect, yet he himself wasn't so clear about it. You call that nothing wrong? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but roll his eyes at Su Li. In his heart, he fairly approved of the management method of keeping the House of Swords and House of Sabers independent. As for the sanguinary competition in the House of Swords and House of Sabers for the position of master of the respective houses, he didn't feel anything was wrong with it. The Cloud Continent was a world where the strong were respected, and if one wanted to become an extraordinary figure, there would naturally be no lack of hardships and dangers. Only by traversing through these layer upon layer of hardships and dangers would one truly stand at the peak. This was something that Duan Lingtian felt strongly about. Because he possessed the 2 lifetimes worth of memories of the rebirth martial emperor, whereas, the rebirth martial emperor had walked step by step to achieve the accomplishments he attained in those 2 lifetimes and became a martial emperor stage expert that stood at the peak of Cloud Continent in the end. Su Li, in this way, if you want to compete for the position of Master of the House of Swords in the future, then you have to undergo a sanguinary competition with another 17 outstanding disciples of the House of Swords. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian thought of this, and his brows knit tightly as he was worried for Su Li. Yes, Su Li nodded. This is the normal process, of course, Master isn't forcing me to go compete to become the Master of the House of Swords. Senior is really good to you. Duan Lingtian smiled. After chatting idly for some time, Duan Lingtian's group of 3 bid their farewells to Su Li before leaving the herbaceous peony pavilion. After he returned to the Narcissus Pavilion, Duan Lingtian didn't return to his room but stayed outside the pavilion instead as he earnestly cultivated the high-grade heaven-rank martial skill, 9 Dragons Radiant Flash. After the series of encounters from earlier, Duan Lingtian's state of mind had been changing constantly, and he'd long since forgotten the feelings he had from cultivating the 9 Dragons Radiant Flash earlier. So when he cultivated it once again now, he didn't have that feeling of desiring speed yet achieving nothing. Swoosh. Swoosh, Duan Lingtian's fingers formed into a sword and struck out, and then 2 divine dragons condensed from origin energy bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they whistled out. The comparatively more material divine dragon amongst the 2 suddenly shot out 2 flashes from its eyes. Swish, swish, the flashes tore through the sky and flashed out with an extremely terrifying speed before striking onto the enormous rock outside the pavilion. During the past few days, Duan Lingtian had frequently cultivated the 9 Dragons Radiant Flash, so this enormous rock had long since been covered in holes. After cultivating for a while, Duan Lingtian stopped, and then he held the wind concept fragment as he meditated in cultivation. His wind concept improved ceaselessly. The incident that occurred today was very quickly tossed to the back of his mind by Duan Lingtian. In his world, only the wind concept that was like a meditating monk when silent and was like a frenzied rabbit when moving remained. Time slowly flowed by and the date the martial competition of the 10 dynasties began grew closer and closer. During these last 2 days, not a single young genius of the 10 dynasties left Skywolf Fort, and all of them seemed to have reached a tacit understanding to stay in their respective pavilions and cultivate. Every single one of them felt extremely great pressure. Perhaps they were considered to be extraordinary existences in their respective dynasties. But now, they weren't competing with only the young geniuses from the dynasties they were from, they were also competing with the young geniuses from another 9 dynasties. Even if one was the number 1 expert in the younger generation of one's dynasty, one wouldn't dare say that one would surely be stronger than the young geniuses of the other 9 dynasties. In the blink of an eye, the day before the martial competition of the 10 dynasties began had arrived. Dusk descended and the setting sun was blood red, causing the entire Skywolf Fort to seem as if it was tainted with blood, and it looked to be extremely magnificent and beautiful. Time has really flowed quickly. The martial competition of the 10 dynasties is tomorrow. Duan Lingtian leaned on the pavilion's balcony as he looked at the red glow that covered the sky and muttered. He'd already made his preparation to welcome the competition between the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties tomorrow. Big Brother Duan. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian saw Feng Tianwu flying over from afar, and he was instantly slightly surprised. Tianwu, where did you go? Big Brother Duan, I went to inquire about the rules in the first round of the martial competition tomorrow. Feng Tianwu smiled mysteriously. 783 Chapter 784, Life and Death Selection. The rules for the first round of the martial competition. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled, and showed neither approval or disapproval. What's there to inquire about? It's simply advancement by battle, the usual. All along the way here, Duan Lingtian had experienced many martial competitions, and he was extremely familiar with this usual method of advancement by battle. Big Brother Duan, the rules of the first round of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties isn't a battle between 2 people to advance. Feng Tianwu's gave emitted mysteriousness. It isn't advancement by battle. Then what is it? Needless to say, Duan Lingtian was really slightly curious when he heard Feng Tianwu. I heard that during the first round of the selections in the martial competition, all 100 young geniuses of the 10 dynasties will enter a place in the Skywolf Fort. After that, all of us will be locked within and asked to carry out a battle royal. Once a certain amount of people have died, the battle royal will stop. Without exception, besides protecting oneself properly, everyone that enters must kill others. Feng Tianwu caught her breath before slowly speaking. Chaotic battle. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but gasp. What does the Skywolf Fort think we are? Machines of slaughter. Needless to say, this rule was extremely brutal. At least, it was brutal in Duan Lingtian's opinion at this moment. It was only the first round of the selections, yet the corpses of many had to be used to pave the way for a few, and it was something that was difficult to accept. Moreover, in the eyes of many young geniuses, the martial competition of the 10 dynasties was actually only an ordinary stage. Even though some of them didn't think that they would be able to become eminent in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, yet they wanted to use it to temper themselves. Duan Lingtian was sure that once this rule was announced, there would surely be many young geniuses amongst the 100 young geniuses from the 10 dynasties that would refuse to participate. It was only the first round of the selection, yet it was already a life and death selection, and elimination was tightly bound together with death, causing one to have no other choice. Besides that, I also heard that up until now, exactly how the battle royal will be carried out it's something only the few fort masters of Skywolf Fort know. I wonder if there will be any special restrictions in battle royal of the first round of the selections. Feng Tianwu continued. Duan Lingtian nodded, and then his eyes flashed. If it's possible, it's best to seek cooperation. Moreover, it must be people we trust. If they were to cooperate with people they didn't trust, then who knew if the other person would silently stab you in the back? So if only people that couldn't be trusted remained to be chose, it would be better to act alone. I've thought it through. I'll cooperate with Big Brother Duan, Big Brother Zhang, and Su Li to form a small team. At that time, let me see who dares offend our group. Feng Tianwu's beautiful eyes flickered with a bright light, and her words were filled with confidence towards Duan Lingtian's strength. That's a good idea. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up, and then he flew out to leave Narcissus Pavilion. Let's go. We'll go see Big Brother Zhang and Su Li. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian, Feng Tian, and Zhang Shouyang had once again arrived at the herbaceous peony pavilion, and then they entered Su Li's room and joined Su Li once more. Duan Lingtian, the martial competition of the 10 dynasties is tomorrow. What are all of you so anxiously looking for me for? Su Li asked curiously. Yeah, Brother Lingtian, what exactly has happened? Zhang Shouyang asked. Zhang Shouyang was called over by Duan Lingtian, yet Duan Lingtian hadn't had the time to explain before bringing Zhang Shouyang to arrive at Su Li's place. So Zhang Shouyang still didn't know why Duan Lingtian had gathered all of them together. Tianwu, you tell them. Duan Lingtian looked at Feng Tianwu and smiled lightly. Feng Tianwu agreed before slowly telling Su Li and Zhang Shouyang about the rules of the first round of the selections in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties that she'd told Duan Lingtian earlier. Instantly, their expressions couldn't help becoming grim. All 100 of us have to enter a place and undergo a battle royal in the first round of the selections. Su Li couldn't help but gasp. Who exactly set such a crazy rule? At that time, there'll probably be at least half of the people that would be unwilling to play with Skywolf Fort. Indeed, Zhang Shouyang said with a serious expression, once this rule is exposed, more than half the people will surely take the initiative to forfeit themselves. After all, they only have a single life. Unless it was someone who was especially confident of his own strength, otherwise, it was almost impossible for them to be willing to participate in a life and death selection like that. If what Miss Tianwu said is real, then the first round of the selection in the martial competition is practically capable of comparing to the competition in our blade sect for the position of Master of the House of Swords and House of Sabers. Su Li's eyes flashed as he spoke with a serious tone. Tianwu heard from a Skywolf Fort elder. That person had a silver-eyed Skywolf badge on his chest. Duan Lingtian said, so this information ought to be true. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but smile when he saw Su Li and Zhang Shouyang gazes flickered and clearly seemed to be filled with fear towards the martial competition tomorrow. I and Tianwu came looking for the two of you mainly to discuss how to deal with the life and death selection in the first round tomorrow. Su Li and Zhang Shouyang's gazes descended onto Duan Lingtian in unison when they heard this. I and Tianwu intend to form a small team with the two of you to face the remaining 90+ young geniuses of the various dynasties and survive the first round of the selections tomorrow. Duan Lingtian spoke of the suggestion he'd discussed with Feng Tianwu. This can be done, I agree. Su Li's eyes lit up. I agree as well. Zhang Shouyang had no objections. It was because they mutually trusted Duan Lingtian, otherwise, it would be utterly impossible for them to so quickly arrive at a common view. After all, once they decided to cooperate, it would be equivalent to handing over their unguarded backs to the other, and it required mutual trust to be done. In Su Li's room, Duan Lingtian's group of 4 came to a common view, and they would form a small team that would face the first round of the selections together in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties that was held tomorrow. In next to no time, the 4 of them dispersed. The veil of the night sky gradually descended, and the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties were either trying to improve their cultivations, comprehending concept, or cultivating martial skills. An atmosphere that was serious and carried along slight oppression seemed to be welcoming the arrival of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties tomorrow morning. The martial competition of the 10 dynasties was held by the Skywolf Fort for the 10 dynasties. No matter which dynasty a young genius was from, so long as the young genius was capable of becoming eminent and standing out in the martial competition, then the dynasty would obtain the rewards of the Skywolf Fort. Besides a grade 3 spirit weapon, numerous medicinal pills, and high-grade origin stones, the rewards also included concept fragments left behind by deceased void transformation stage experts. The concept fragments were the most precious amongst all the rewards, and anyone from the 10 dynasties wanted to obtain them. It was precisely because of this that the 10 dynasties would be so diligent towards the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, and it was even to the extent that they'd prepared for an entire 4 years plus for it. 4 years, it wasn't long, yet wasn't short either, and it was sufficient for many things to occur. For example, when the Duan Lingtian from 4 years ago was compared with the current him, it was simply like the difference between the heavens and the earth, and it was difficult to connect the two of them together. Of course, it was in terms of cultivation. As for appearance, there wasn't much difference between the current Duan Lingtian and the Duan Lingtian from 4 years ago. He normally paid attention to taking care of his appearance, and coupled with his deep cultivation, the aging of his appearance was next to nothing. It was even to the extent that if Duan Lingtian was capable of breaking through to the martial monarch stage in 10 years, he would forever retain his youthful look. At that time, he would be able to maintain his current appearance for eternity. No matter if it was 30 years, 50 years, or even 100 years from now, even if the internal organs in his body gradually grew old, his appearance wouldn't change in the slightest. The myriad of beings in the world awoke at dawn, and the entire Skywolf Fort became bustling. The representatives and young geniuses of the 10 dynasties left their respective pavilions and headed towards the vast combat arena in the outer fort. After a short moment, most of the people stood in the sky above the combat arena and waited silently. Whoosh, 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 8 figures flashed past and arrived at a side of the sky above the combat arena in the blink of an eye. It's Duan Lingtian, and that's Blade Sect's Sword 13. That's the Darken Dynasty's Feng clan's eldest master, Feng Wudao, and the unrivaled beauty by his side ought to be his daughter, Feng Tianwu. Many young geniuses of the 10 dynasties couldn't help but whisper in discussion when they saw these 8 figures descending. The 8 people that had just arrived was Duan Lingtian's group. Besides Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang, there was also Su Li's master, Feng Wudao, and another pair of master and disciple. The younger one amongst them was Long Yun, whereas before Long Yun stood a slovenly and bearded man with a broad saber carried on his waist, and the clothes he wore were old clothes, causing him to seem like a bandit. He's Saber 5, Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he vaguely guessed the identity of this bearded man. Saber 5, the vice sect master of the House of Sabers in the Blade Sect. It wouldn't be long before he would be able to become the master of the House of Sabers, and his status in the Blade Sect would become something only the master of the House of Swords could compare to. The other members of the Blade Sect could only look up to him from afar. Duan Lingtian's group of 6 had met Saber 5 on the way here, and at that time, Saber 5 brought Long Yun to fly towards them before joining them without saying a single word. Of course, whether Saber 5 said anything to Sword 13 via voice transmission was something Duan Lingtian was unable to know. Duan Lingtian, I hope you didn't do anything to my foster father, otherwise, no matter which corner of the world you go to, I'll still not let you off. Suddenly, a voice transmission filled with ruthlessness clearly entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he glanced indifferently at Long Yun. He was able to discern that it was Long Yun's voice. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian looked at Long Yun and replied indifferently via voice transmission. Long Yun, do you think that you can firmly defeat me just because your cultivation has broken through to the second level of the void interpretation stage now? 784 Chapter 785, Ning Can. Early on when Long Yun had just come over with Saber 5, Duan Lingtian had already utilized his spiritual force to detect Long Yun's cultivation. Second level of the void interpretation stage. Even though Duan Lingtian was slightly shocked by this, yet he wasn't really surprised. After all, no matter if it was Su Li's master, Sword 13, or Long Yun's master, Saber 5, both of them were members of the Foreign Lands Blade Sect. Perhaps the Blade Sect was only a third-rate sect in the entire Foreign Lands, yet the cultivation resources it possessed was far from something the various powers in the 10 dynasties could compare to. In the eyes of the members of the 10 dynasties, spirit fruits utilized by void interpretation stage martial artists could only be chanced upon by luck, yet in the Blade Sect, there was instead quite a good amount of stock. As the vice masters of the House of Swords and House of Sabers, no matter if it was Sword 13 or Saber 5, it wasn't difficult for them to take spirit fruits utilized by void interpretation stage martial artists. So even if Long Yun's cultivation had stepped into the second level of the void interpretation stage, Duan Lingtian wasn't really surprised. But if he was to carefully count it, then Long Yun's improvement was undoubtedly the greatest amongst the group of young geniuses of their darkened dynasty. After all, during the dynasty martial competition of the darkened dynasty that day, Long Yun was only a 7th level void initiation stage martial artist. In other words, he'd only used a year of time to transform into a 2nd level void interpretation stage martial artist from a 7th level void initiation stage martial artist. Such improvement was sufficient to make anyone feel shocked. How could you possibly know? Duan Lingtian's voice transmission that entered Long Yun's ears caused Long Yun's face to go grim, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. After all, he'd never fought since breaking through to the 2nd level of the void interpretation stage. Moreover, logically speaking, besides his master, it was impossible for anyone else to know that he'd broken through to the 2nd level of the void interpretation stage a few days ago. When faced with Long Yun's terror and uneasiness, Duan Lingtian couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it, and he instead shot his eyes at the other people from the 10 dynasties. Not long after, all the 100 young geniuses of the 10 dynasties including himself had already gathered together. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he muttered, "The martial competition of the 10 dynasties is about to begin." As if it was setting off Duan Lingtian's muttering, 2 extremely ear-piercing howls of the wind suddenly sounded out from the direction of Skywolf Fort's inner fort, and it sounded out briefly as it approached. At practically the exact same time, 2 figures had appeared out of thin air in the air above the combat arena in the outer fort. The 2 people that had arrived wore the green-colored uniform of Skywolf Fort, and the eyes of the Skywolf badges on their chests were both golden in color. Their identities were obvious. They were 2 vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort. One of the vice fort masters wasn't unfamiliar to Duan Lingtian and the others, and it was Feng Wei who'd just come looking for Duan Lingtian 2 days ago with the Dongguo clan's patriarch. As for the other vice fort master, his status in Skywolf Fort was clearly higher than Feng Wei. When Feng Wei stood in the air, the position where he stood was faintly a bit behind this person, and it imperceptibly revealed Feng Wei's reverence towards this person. This was an old man with an emaciated face, yet his eyes flickered with bright lights, and it was entirely not like something an old man possessed. "I'm the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Can. The person by my side is also a vice fort master of our Skywolf Fort, he's called Feng Wei." The old man's gaze flashed past everyone from the 10 dynasties, and he spoke with a calm tone and introduced himself in Feng Wei. "Greetings, vice fort masters." Instantly, many people bowed and nodded in greeting. Of course, there were a few people that refused to care. These people were precisely Duan Lingtian's group that stood silently at the side. After Ning Can smiled lightly to the others, his squinted eyes descended onto Duan Lingtian's group before flashing up and down on 2 people amongst Duan Lingtian's group. "Sword 13, Saber 5, I truly never imagined that you 2 would actually come to my Skywolf Fort together. I hope you can forgive my breach of etiquette." The people Ning Can's gaze was on was precisely Sword 13 and Saber 5. Sword 13 and Saber 5 were respectively the vice master of the House of Swords and House of Sabers. Most importantly, both of them were already set as the next masters of the House of Swords and House of Sabers, so they were the two great leaders of the Blade sect in the future. So even if it was Ning Can, he didn't dare be the slightest bit disrespectful when facing Sword 13 and Saber 5. Old man Ning, go about your business and take it as we don't exist. We've come here today mainly for the sake of testing the cultivation results of two brats. Saber 5 glanced indifferently at Ning Can as he spoke. Saber 5, I've only heard that Sword 13 has taken a disciple, could it be that you've taken a disciple as well? Ning Can was slightly surprised as he asked. Greet him. Right at this moment, Saber 5 looked at Long Yun. Greetings, Vice Fort Master Ning. Long Yun didn't dare dally when he heard his master's command, and he hurriedly took a step forward before bowing to Ning Can. Haha, not bad, not bad. Ning Can smiled as he nodded to Long Yun, and then he looked at Su Li. You ought to be Sword 13's disciple, right? According to my understanding of Sword 13, normal people are utterly unable to enter his sights, let alone become his disciple. I can know from this that you're surely extraordinary. Vice Fort Master Ning, you're too kind. Su Li replied modestly. At the same time, besides descending onto Su Li, the gazes of all the young geniuses of the various dynasties including the Darken dynasty had descended even more onto Long Yun. They'd once seen Su Li 2 days ago, and they knew that he was the closed-door disciple of an expert from a power in the foreign lands. At that time, they were filled with jealousy and envy towards Su Li, and all of them wished for nothing more than to replace Su Li. Now, when they found out that Long Yun had a status similar to Su Li, all of them looked at Long Yun with gazes that were similarly filled with jealousy and envy. Long Yun is actually the disciple of an expert from a power in the foreign lands. His and Su Li's luck is really good, to actually be able to take an expert from a power in the foreign lands as their master. They seem to only be from that Darkstone Empire, now they can be considered to be pheasants that have transformed into phoenixes. Why don't we have such good fate? Some of the young geniuses from the Darken dynasty couldn't help but whisper in discussion, and there were even many young geniuses from other dynasties that joined in later on. So this is Long Yun's fortuitous encounter. Zishang's gaze flashed as he muttered. Before he'd encountered Duan Lingtian and before Duan Lingtian had made a name for himself in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, Zishang, who was similarly one of the 5 great young master that were most outstanding in the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, had been acquainted with Long Yun long ago. It was precisely because of this that when he saw Long Yun at the dynasty martial competition of the Darken dynasty that day, he'd guessed that Long Yun ought to have obtained some fortuitous encounters just like him. The facts proved that his guess was correct. It was precisely because Long Yun had taken an expert from a power in the foreign lands as his master that he possessed his extraordinary cultivation. Amongst the former 5 great young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, it's probably only me and Long Yun that have gone the highest and furthest. Crazy Young Master, Flame Young Master, and Sword Master have already been left far behind by us. Zishang couldn't help but sigh when he recalled the other 3 great young masters that were equally famous to him all those years ago. Firstly, on behalf of our Skywolf Fort, I, Ning Can, welcome everyone that has traveled far to arrive in the ancient desert city. No matter what the outcome of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties this time is, our Skywolf Fort will give the 10 dynasties a gift for our first meeting. Ning Can spoke in a clear voice. At the same time, he looked at the representatives of the 10 dynasties. Representatives of the various dynasties, please take a step forward. Instantly, 10 people that included the emperor of the Darken dynasty that stood in the sky took a step forward. Swoosh, 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 At practically the exact same time, with a raise of his hand, Ning Can shot out 10 flowing lights that flashed directly towards the 10 people that had stood out. The 10 of them hurriedly stretched out their hands to grab it, and when they looked at their hands, all their faces instantly flushed red. Concept fragment, someone couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. These 10 first-level advanced concept fragments are the gift of our Skywolf Fort to all of your respective dynasties for our first meeting. Ning Can spoke slowly. Thank you, Vice Fort Master Ning. The representatives of the 10 dynasties took a deep breath and suppressed their excited feelings before thanking him. Even though Ning Can had only given them the lowest concept fragment, even this lowest concept fragment was sufficient to assist one to comprehend advanced concept. A concept fragment like this even had an over 50% possibility of producing a void transformation stage expert for their respective dynasties. The gazes of the other people that knew what a concept fragment meant lit up now, and their breathing couldn't help but become hurried. What extravagance! The Skywolf Fort gave out 10 concept fragments as a mere meeting gift. A concept fragment is the condensation of a void transformation stage expert's comprehension in void transformation concept, and it's extremely valuable. Concept fragments have always been existences of legend in our dynasties. Yeah, the amount of void transformation stage experts in our various dynasties can be counted with the fingers on our hands, not to mention the concept fragments left behind by these experts after their deaths. Many people whispered in discussion. In next to no time, those young geniuses of the 10 dynasties that had never heard of concept fragments in the past were moved after they understood what a concept fragment meant. Presently, besides the 2 vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort, only Duan Lingtian, Sword 13, Saber 5, Su Li, and Long Yun were able to maintain their composure. Even if it was Feng Wudao and Feng Tianwu, both of them were slightly moved now, as they were shocked by the Skywolf Fort's extravagance. The reason Duan Lingtian and the others were able to be so composed was that they knew that a mere first-level advanced concept fragment was utterly nothing to the Skywolf Fort. In next to no time, everyone returned to their senses because Ningkan had already started speaking once more. 785 Chapter 786, Age Measuring Pearl. So long as the young geniuses of your respective dynasties become eminent in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties later, you'll be able to obtain various other generous rewards. Ningkan continued. Ningkan's words caused the gazes of all the representatives of the 10 dynasties to glow, and most of the young geniuses even rubbed their fists together and were prepared to show their capability and make a great display in the martial competition. Now, all the young geniuses from the 10 dynasties that have obtained the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, please come out and stand together with the young geniuses from your own dynasty, said Ningkan. Instantly, the young geniuses present soared up into the sky, whereas Duan Lingtian's group was the same as well, and they flashed up into the sky before converging with Zishang, Bai Hao, and the other young geniuses of the Darkened dynasty. Duan Lingtian, I'll sooner or later trample on you beneath my feet and make you kowtow while begging for mercy before me. A familiar and gloomy voice sounded out by Duan Lingtian's ears. Is that so? In the first possible moment, Duan Lingtian discerned the owner of this voice transmission. His gaze instantly descended onto his old rival, Zishang, and he replied with a disdainful tone. According to my knowledge, you seem to have said these words more than once, right? You. Zishang's face went grim as he glared angrily at Duan Lingtian, and the origin energy on his body roiled as if it would whistle out at any moment. In the end, Zishang took a deep breath and suppressed the flames of rage in his heart, and he didn't flare up in the end. Not to mention he didn't have much confidence in going against Duan Lingtian. Even if Duan Lingtian was far from being a match for him, he wouldn't dare act rashly at this moment. What a joke! This was Skywolf Fort, and it wasn't a place that he could act wantonly. After Duan Lingtian retorted to Zishang and caused Zishang to be angry out of embarrassment, he paid no further attention to Zishang and instead looked towards the young geniuses from the other 9 dynasties that had gathered together. These young geniuses were gathered into 9 groups now, and they represented the other 9 dynasties. Those are the members of Darming dynasty. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto the 10 young geniuses nearby at the first possible moment. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's gaze locked onto one of them. It was precisely because of this person that he was able to recognize that these 10 young geniuses were from the Darming dynasty at the first possible moment. Zhao Weiyi, one of the 2 most outstanding young experts in the Darming dynasty, and he was as equally famous as the Darming dynasty's crown prince. When Duan Lingtian looked at Zhao Weiyi just happened to be looking at him as well. But when Duan Lingtian's gaze swept over, Zhao Weiyi had avoided his gaze instead, and it seemed as if Zhao Weiyi didn't dare meet his gaze. Perhaps battling Duan Lingtian the other time had already caused a great psychological effect on him. Besides that, Duan Lingtian also saw the Darming dynasty's imperial family's 3rd prince, Lu Hao, and those few young geniuses that had attacked him that day. Presently, all of them had extremely unsightly expressions when they looked at him. That person ought to be the Darming dynasty's crown prince, Lu Yong. The young man that stood before the 3rd prince Lu Hao attracted Duan Lingtian's gaze. The young man had an imposing bearing, and every single move of his emitted the aura of one in high position at every possible moment. It was precisely because of this that Duan Lingtian extremely easily guessed this person's identity. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed past the young geniuses of the other dynasties before quickly locking onto 2 people. These people were precisely the people that were in conflict with him and Zhang Shouyang at the restaurant nearby Skywolf Fort a few days ago, and they seemed to be from the Darchu dynasty. These people ought to be members of the Darchu dynasty. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. In next to no time, all the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties took their places, and the gazes of everyone descended onto Ningkan in unison. Right at this moment, whoosh, 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 10 figures flashed out from Skywolf Fort's inner fort, and they arrived in the sky above the combat arena to stand by Ning Chan and Feng Wei's side in the blink of an eye. These were 10 old men that wore green-colored uniform. The Skywolf badges on their chests have a skywolf with silver eyes. They're elders of Skywolf Fort. Many people guess the identities of the old men via the Skywolf badges on the old men's chests. Only core disciples and elders of Skywolf Fort had the qualifications to wear Skywolf badges with silver eyes. Moreover, all of these old men seemed dignified and extraordinary, and they were obviously elders of Skywolf Fort. Next, the 10 of them will respectively go to the young geniuses of one dynasty. At that time, they'll take out an age-measuring pearl, and all of you have to place your hands on it. Ningkan looked around at the 100 young geniuses from the 10 dynasties. I presume that all of you know beforehand that our Skywolf Fort only allows young geniuses below the age of 40 to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Ning Kan's words weren't surprising to many people. Because this restriction had long since been spread out to the kingdoms that were at the lowest level of the dynasties, and the young geniuses present were naturally extremely clear about it. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian noticed that some young geniuses of a few dynasties went pale, and they seemed to be slightly uneasy. Could it be that they've concealed their true age? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this scene. Right at this moment, each of the 10 elders of Skywolf Fort flashed out to the young geniuses of one of the 10 dynasties. One of them had arrived before Duan Lingtian and the other young geniuses of Darkin Dynasty. A milky white pearl appeared out of thin air in his hand, and this pearl's surface emitted a faint white light, causing one to know it was extraordinary with a single look. Age-measuring pearl. With a single glance, Duan Lingtian recognized this milky white-colored pearl, and it was precisely the age-measuring pearl that measured one's age. Of course, this age-measuring pearl wasn't almighty, and it could only measure the age of people below the age of 70. So long as someone below the age of 70 placed their hand on it, it would be able to provide a different reaction. When a 1-year-old child placed his hand on it, a crimson-red ribbon would appear on it. A 2-year-old child would cause 2 crimson-red ribbons to appear. So on and so forth. A 10-year-old would cause 10 crimson-red ribbons to appear. Once a 11-year-old youth placed his hand on it, it wouldn't produce 11 crimson-red ribbons but an orange-colored ribbon. Crimson, orange, yellow, green, azure, blue, violet. The ribbons of every single color would at most appear in the number of 10. A 20-year-old would cause 10 orange ribbons to appear. A 21-year-old would cause a yellow ribbon to appear. A 30-year-old would cause 10 yellow ribbons to appear. A 31-year-old would cause a green ribbon to appear. A 40-year-old would cause 10 green ribbons to appear. So on and so forth until the age of 70, 10 violet-colored ribbons would be produced. Once one above the age of 70 placed their hand on the age-measuring pearl, an anomaly would appear in the age-measuring pearl and cause it to be unable to measure age as normal. In next to no time, the young geniuses of the Darkin Dynasty, including Duan Lingtian, placed their hands successively onto the age-measuring pearl. The ribbons that appeared out of thin air on the age-measuring pearl caused their eyes to be unable to help but light up. Most people had ages above 35. In next to no time, it was Su Li's turn. Su Li placed his hand onto the pearl and 10 yellow ribbons instantly appeared on the age-measuring pearl, and it measured Su Li's age at 30 years old. Su Li's only 30 years old. Instantly, the group of young geniuses from Darkin Dynasty that didn't know Su Li's true age couldn't help but be moved. In other words, during the dynasty martial competition that was held 1 year ago, Su Li was only 29. And younger than 30. As expected of Sword 13's disciple. This scene was noticed by the Skywolf Fort's vice fort master, Ning Kan, causing his eyes to light up, and he couldn't help but praise. Even though Ning Kan's voice wasn't loud, yet it still entered into the ears of everyone present. Instantly, the young geniuses and representatives of the other 9 dynasties shot their gazes onto the age-measuring pearl that Su Li had placed his hand on. All of them were shocked when they saw the 10 yellow-colored ribbons on it. He's only 30 years old. As expected of the closed-door disciple taken by the expert from the power of the foreign lands, Blade sect. Such natural talent is shocking. To think I thought it was only because of his good luck earlier, now it would seem like there was a reason why that expert of the Blade sect took him as his disciple. The young geniuses of the various dynasties sighed with emotion. You're 40 years old already. Suddenly, a gloomy voice sounded out, causing the gazes of everyone present to move from Su Li in unison and descend towards the distance. It's from the Darchu dynasty's group. Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed as he concentrated his attention and looked towards the source of the voice. Presently, there was a problem amongst the young geniuses of the Darchu dynasty. Precisely speaking, it was a great problem. There was a young man that looked to be almost middle-aged with his hand on the age-measuring pearl, and 10 green ribbons had appeared on the age-measuring pearl. 10 green ribbons represented that the person who placed his hand on the age-measuring pearl was already 40 years old. 40 years old. The expression of the two vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort sank instantly when they saw this scene. In the next moment, strands of gloomy aura swept out with them as the center, and it caused the representatives and young geniuses of the various dynasties to feel a chill run down their spines. Whoosh! Under the gazes of everyone present, the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, Feng Wei, vanished into thin air, and when appeared once more, he'd already arrived before the young man that was measured to be 40 already. You're 40 years old. Feng Wei stared at the young man as a gloomy aura swept out from his body, and then it enveloped the young man, causing the young man's face to go pale as his body shivered. At this moment, he felt as if it wasn't a person that was standing before him, but it was instead a bloodthirsty skywolf that would open its bloody mouth and swallow him up at any moment. Yes, Vice Fort Master, I just turned 42 days ago, and it ought to not be a problem, right? The young man's voice started trembling as he asked with an extremely perturbed tone. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he looked at this scene. This young man from Darchu dynasty was one of the few people that instantly went pale when Vice Fort Master Ningkan spoke of the age-measuring pearl earlier. He'd already turned 40, and it also meant that he didn't conform to the requirements of martial competition of the 10 dynasties held by Skywolf Fort this time. He's probably going to be struck with misfortune. At the instant that this young man finished speaking, Duan Lingtian acutely sensed the killing intent emitted from Feng Wei, and it was an extremely icy cold killing intent. 786 Chapter 787, The Biggest Winner. Practically at the instant Duan Lingtian thought this, Feng Wei moved. Swoosh. In the next moment, the head of the young man from the Darchu dynasty that was measured to be 40 split open suddenly, causing fresh blood to spray out, and he plunged down without any signs of life. Bang! The young man's corpse hadn't even descended on the combat arena when it was completely destroyed by the extremely violet wings emitted from Feng Wei's palm, and it transformed into powder that covered the sky and vanished into thin air as if it had fused completely into the heavens and the earth. All of this happened in the blink of an eye, and it was swift to the point that only Sword 13 and Saber 5 were able to react to it. After a short moment, the young geniuses of the various dynasties reacted, and they couldn't help but go pale. There was also a portion that frowned and felt the members of Skywolf Fort were truly too overbearing. Isn't it just because he's 40 years old? Wouldn't it be over by giving him slight punishment and removing his qualification to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties? Did it require going so far as to kill him? This was the thoughts of the various young geniuses and the representatives of the 10 dynasties. Even though the expression of the Darchu dynasty's representative was unsightly, he dared be angry but didn't dare voice it out. Not to mention this wasn't the Darchu dynasty. Even if this was the Darchu dynasty, he could only stand aside obediently and put on an act of humbleness before an expert like Feng Wei. Lord Vice Fort Master, I was wrong. I shouldn't have concealed my true age. Right when most people couldn't bear the sight of the scene from before, a person walked out from the young geniuses of Darming dynasty, and he knelt in midair with his head lowered as his body shivered. Vice Fort Masters, please spare my life. Please spare my life. This young man that walked out from the Darming dynasty's group begged endlessly for mercy. For a time, he'd successfully moved the attention of everyone present, causing the gazes of every present to descend onto him in unison. It's him. Duan Lingtian noticed with a single glance that this person was one of the people who instantly went pale when Ningkan mentioned the age-measuring pearl. There seems to be another 3 people. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed past the young geniuses from the other 3 dynasties. Practically at the exact same time, one of the young geniuses dashed out from each of those 3 dynasties and similarly knelt in midair, and he knelt before the two vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort with a shivering body as he pleaded for mercy with a sorrowful voice. "Lord Vice Fort Master, spare my life." 4 people knelt in midair and ceaseless kowtowed as they begged for mercy without end. If they knelt on the ground, they'd probably have already caused their skulls to split open and bleed from their kowtowing. They knew clearly in their heart that if they didn't stand out right now, they would similarly be exposed when it was their turn to have their age measured by the age-measuring pearl. They would be exposed sooner or later, so it was better to admit their mistakes earlier, and perhaps they would be able to plead for a chance at survival. Obviously, the scene of Feng Wei's move to kill the young man from the Darchu dynasty that was already 40 years old and greatly terrified them. Meanwhile, the representatives of the 4 dynasties including the Darming dynasty went grim, as they'd never imagined that an incident like this would occur. Besides the Darchu dynasty, there were actually people that were at the age of 40 and didn't conform to the requirements of Skywolf Fort when holding the martial competition of the 10 dynasties concealed within amongst the young geniuses of their respective dynasties. HMPH. Feng Wei grunted coldly. "Since all of you are standing here today, you undoubtedly had the intention of deceiving our Skywolf Fort. I probably don't have to tell all of you what's the consequence for deceiving our Skywolf Fort, right?" Killing intent that shot into the sky rose on Feng Wei's body as he spoke. "Lord Vice Fort Master, spare me. Lord Vice Fort Master, spare me." The bodies of the 4 young men from different dynasties started trembling intensely, and all of them were terrified to the point their countenance went ghastly pale and their voices trembled. Vice Fort Master Feng, the representative of Darming dynasty, looked at Feng Wei with the intention of pleasing on the young man's behalf. But he hadn't finished speaking when he was terrified to the point of not daring to continue speaking by Feng Wei's icy cold gaze that swept over. "What, you, the representative of Darming dynasty, wants to bear this responsibility?" Feng Wei smiled spuriously as he looked at the representative of Darming dynasty, and it was one of the former 2 great void transformation stage experts of the Zhao clan, Elder Qian. The reason it was said to be former was because the other void transformation stage expert of the Zhao clan had been killed in the Iceflame Pavilion at the Darming dynasty's capital by Sword 13 a few months ago. "If you want to bear this responsibility, I'll allow you to use your life to exchange for his." As he finished speaking, Feng Wei's eyes revealed frightful killing intent, and his terrifying aura swept out to press onto Elder Qian to the point it caused Elder Qian's expression to go pale. Right when the gazes of most people had moved onto Elder Qian, a fierce piercing howl briefly sounded out. In the next moment, everyone saw that a line of blood had appeared out on thin air on the throat of the young man from Darming dynasty that was kneeling in midair. The line of blood ceaselessly grew thicker before spraying out dazzling and resplendent blood, whereas, the young man's body was completely devoid of signs of life as it plunged down from midair. Whoosh! Right at this moment, a figure flashed out from the group of Darming dynasty young geniuses and slapped out with his palm to blast the young man's corpse into powder. After a short moment, the young man that stood in the distance had become the center of attention. Most importantly, there were actually 40 ancient horned dragon silhouettes in the sky above the young man, and such a phenomenon was only drawn into existence by the origin energy that exploded out from within his body. 3rd level of the void interpretation stage. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but reveal an astonished expression when he saw this scene. On the other hand, Feng Wei, who had his aura targeted at Elder Qian, couldn't help but be slightly moved when he looked at the young man. Of course, besides the young man's cultivation, the reason he was moved was mostly because of how resolutely the young man acted. This resoluteness obtained the resonance and praise of Feng Wei from the bottom of his heart. In next to no time, Feng Wei looked at the young man and asked, "What's your name?" "Liu Yang." The young man returned to the group of young geniuses from Darming dynasty before nodding to Feng Wei, and from the beginning until the end, there wasn't a slightest discernible change in his expression. Liu Yang, the crown prince of the Darming dynasty's imperial family and one of the 2 great young experts of the Darming dynasty's younger generation. His strength was obviously far above Zhao Weiyi, who was equally famous to him. Liu Yang: "Good, very good. Are you willing to become my personal disciple?" Feng Wei revealed a rare and brilliant smile, and he stared at Liu Yang with a burning gaze as he asked with a smile. "Personal disciple? The personal disciple of the Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master?" A single sentence from Feng Wei had caused the eyes of all the remaining 8 young geniuses from Darming dynasty to go red. "We can obtain the acknowledgement of the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort just by killing that person that concealed his own age. Besides that, we can even become his personal disciple." All the 8 young geniuses of Darming dynasty including Zhao Weiyi felt a wave of regret in their hearts. They regretted why they didn't make a move to kill that fellow earlier. Otherwise, the person that became the personal disciple of Vice Fort Master Feng would be them and not the Crown Prince, Lu Yong. Master. After feeling shocked from Feng Wei taking the initiative to take him as a disciple, Lu Yong hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times to Feng Wei as the formality when taking Feng Wei as his master. Haha, good, good. Feng Wei laughed loudly with delight, and then he asked, "My good disciple, what concepts have you comprehended?" Master, disciple has already comprehended the concepts of wind, fire, and lightning. Lu Yong spoke respectfully. Wind, fire, and lightning. Feng Wei nodded, and with a raise of his hand, 3 concept fragments had appeared in his hand before directly throwing it to Lu Yong. These 3 concept fragments are respectively a 4th-level wind concept fragment, a 3rd-level fire concept fragment, and a 3rd-level lightning concept fragment. Take it as Master's gift to you. Thank you, Master. Lu Yong stretched out his hands in delight to receive the 3 concept fragments. If one were to look carefully, one would notice that Lu Yong's hands were trembling intensely, and it was trembling from excitement. The face of the group of young geniuses of Darming dynasty whose eyes had gone red from envy earlier had flushed red now, and their gazes descended onto the other 3 young men who'd concealed their true ages. For a time, the origin energy on their bodies surged, and they were prepared to attack those 3 people at any moment. But unfortunately, they were too late. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The young geniuses from the dynasties that those 3 young men who knelt in midair belonged to copied Lu Yong and pounced towards their former companion when they saw Lu Yong had so easily taken the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort as master and obtained 3 concept fragments that caused envy in the hearts of others. Instantly, the 3 young men that knelt in midair hadn't even reacted when they were blasted into powder by a ground of people and completely vanished in this world. Mad. All of them have gone mad. Feng Tianwu's beautiful face went slightly pale when she saw this scene. Never had she imagined that these people would be so cruel and heartless, and they were willing to kill their former companions for the sake of personal benefit. This is the heart of man. Duan Lingtian's expression was calm, and he seemed to not be surprised by the scene before him. His gaze descended onto Lu Yong instead. Lu Yong was a 3rd-level void interpretation stage martial artist and the crown prince of Darming dynasty, and the resoluteness of Lu Yong's action caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but feel apprehensive. Earlier, when the attention of most people was drawn by the representative of the Darming dynasty, Lu Yong had actually made a move to kill the young man at the first possible moment. Not only did his actions help the representative of the Darming dynasty, it also revealed the resoluteness he handled matters with, causing the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, Feng Wei, to take a fancy to him and even take him as a personal disciple. Needless to say, Lu Yong was the biggest winner up to this point. Not only had he obtained formidable backing, he'd even obtained 3 concept fragments that others dreamt of, and even Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be moved by those 3 concept fragments. As for the representatives and young geniuses of the various dynasties, if the gazes they looked at Lu Yong with now could be transformed into sharp blades, then they'd probably have sliced Lu Yong into pieces since long ago. Feng Wei, congratulations on taking a good disciple. Ning Can looked at Feng Wei and smiled. Thank you, martial uncle. Feng Wei was respectful and reverent when facing Ning Can. Ning Can is the martial uncle of Feng Wei. Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised. 787 Chapter 788, Lack of Qualification. But only Duan Lingtian was surprised by this now. The attention of almost everyone had been drawn by the group of young geniuses from the other 3 dynasties. Earlier, these young geniuses had attacked in unison to kill the other 3 young men that had concealed their ages to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Originally, they'd learned from Lu Yong with the intention of obtaining favor of the Vice Fort Master and obtain the extremely precious concept fragments. But now, they were bound to be dreaming. Not to mention it was impossible for so many people to be taken as a disciple by the Vice Fort Master, it was impossible that the Vice Fort Master would take their actions of copying Lu Yong's actions seriously. Continue. In next to no time, Ning Can's stern voice sounded out, and it caused the young geniuses of the 3 dynasties to return to their original positions in succession, whereas when Lu Yong returned to the group of young geniuses from Darming dynasty, he was greeted by numerous burning gazes. Zhao Weiyi stared at Lu Yong with eyes that contained flames of envy that leapt out into appearance and was practically capable of burning anything into ash. At this moment, his heart was filled with unwillingness. On what basis? On what basis has Lu Yong suppressed me in the past and has even obtained an extremely great fortune now, causing him to have the momentum to forever stand above me? He was unwilling, but no matter how unwilling he was, this matter had already become inevitable. When the gazes of everyone was placed on Feng Wei and Elder Qian, who were in a short moment of confrontation, Lu Yong had moved resolutely and won a fortune for himself. Sometimes, fortune was so opportune. An opportunity was momentary and only lasted for an instant. In the blink of an eye, 5 out of the 100 young geniuses from the 10 dynasties had perished. The people that hadn't had their ages measured amongst the remaining 95 young geniuses placed their hands successively on the age-measuring pearl in the hand of the Skywolf Fort Elder. At the side of the Darken dynasty, everyone successively underwent the test. After Su Li, Bai Hao, Zi Shang, and Long Yun became the temporary centers of attention. Because their ages were below 35 and Long Yun was even only a little over 30 years old, causing him to be even younger than Bai Hao and Zi Shang. Saber 5, looks like you've taken a good disciple. Ning Can, who saw Long Yun's test results, smiled as he spoke to Saber 5. Slight complacency suffused Saber 5's face when he heard this. Meanwhile, only Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu on the side of the Darken dynasty hadn't undergone their test. Big brother Duan, you go first. Feng Tianwu lightly smiled as she looked at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian didn't refuse and moved forward to arrive before the Skywolf Fort Elder. The Skywolf Fort Elder couldn't help but be slightly surprised when he saw Duan Lingtian. Just from outward appearance, the violet-clothed young man before him was only around the age of 25. When Duan Lingtian's hand was placed on the age-measuring pearl, besides Su Li, the gazes of all the other young geniuses from Darken dynasty descended onto Duan Lingtian. Even the 2 vice fort master of Skywolf Fort were no exception. Amongst the group of young geniuses present, it was undoubtedly Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu who looked the youngest. Moreover, both of them were similarly from the Darken dynasty, so it was difficult for them to not draw attention. Even some of the representatives and young geniuses of the other dynasties couldn't help but turn and look at Duan Lingtian now, as they wanted to know Duan Lingtian's true age. The reason Su Li wasn't surprised was because he'd known Duan Lingtian since long ago. All those years ago when he'd seen Duan Lingtian for the first time in the Iron Blood Army's genius camp, he was 18 and Duan Lingtian was 16, and it was precisely because of this that he'd always remembered that Duan Lingtian was younger than him by 2 years. Age-measuring pearl. Duan Lingtian stretched his hand out to touch the age-measure pearl. Instantly, he felt a warm energy being emitted from the age-measuring pearl, and it flowed through his entire body in the blink of an eye. In next to no time, this warm energy returned to the age-measuring pearl. Meanwhile, 8 yellow ribbons appeared on the age-measuring pearl, and it indicated that Duan Lingtian's current age, 28. 28 years old. Instantly, many people that were paying close attention to Duan Lingtian couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Even though they could determine that Duan Lingtian ought to be below 30 years old from his outward appearance, when they really saw the outcome measured by the age-measuring pearl, they still couldn't help but feel a wave of shock. I truly never imagined that there's an existence below the age of 30 amongst the 10 young geniuses from the Darken dynasty. Even young people like this have come, looks like the Darken dynasty really has nobody else. Many people looked at Duan Lingtian and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. HMPH. When they saw Duan Lingtian in the limelight, the face of all of the people that weren't on good terms with Duan Lingtian like Zi Shang, Zhao Weiyi, and the others sank, and their eyes flickered with cold lights. What's your name? Meanwhile, the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Can, looked at Duan Lingtian and asked with a light smile. The question of Ning Can's caused many young geniuses to reveal envious expressions as they looked at Duan Lingtian. They were able to discern that this vice fort master had aroused quite an amount of interest towards Duan Lingtian. Looks like this Duan Lingtian is going to be taken as a disciple by the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort. I think it might not necessarily be like that. Even though Duan Lingtian is young, he hasn't revealed his cultivation, and before his cultivation is revealed, his value is undetermined, so it ought to be insufficient to make Vice Fort Master Ning take him as a disciple. Many people whispered in discussion and spoke similar words. Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian looked at Ning Can and looked at him neither arrogantly nor humbly. You're really not bad, so long as you're able to pass the first round of the selections, then I, Ning Can, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, will be willing to take you as my personal disciple. Ning Can raised his voice and spoke. According to Ning Kan's tone, it was as if him being willing to take Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple was fortune that Duan Lingtian had accumulated for 3 lifetimes, and at the same time, he didn't think that Duan Lingtian would refuse. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but frown when he heard Ning Kan, and he neither agreed nor disagreed. Want to take me as your personal disciple? That will depend on if I'm willing. Duan Lingtian was unhappy here, whereas those young geniuses instead revealed envious expression as they looked at him, and all of them wished for nothing more than to swallow him up. Even though Ning Kan didn't directly take Duan Lingtian as his disciple, the promise Ning Kan made still caused the group of young geniuses to be unable to help but feel envious in their hearts. Why didn't we get such treatment? If they found out about Duan Lingtian's current thoughts, they would probably have the intention of killing Duan Lingtian. Right at this moment, Sword 13, who stood silently at the side, glanced indifferently at Ning Kan before he said, Ning Kan, it isn't that I'm looking down on you, but you probably don't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as your disciple. Don't have the qualifications. Sword 13's words were like a stone that caused 1,000 waves, and it caused the atmosphere at the scene to go deathly silent. All the young geniuses that revealed envious gazes when they looked at Duan Lingtian were completely dumbstruck. Every single one of them wished for nothing more than to become the personal disciple of Ning Kan, the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort. Yet now, someone said that Ning Kan didn't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as his disciple, and at the same time that it caused them to feel disbelief, their gazes descended successively onto Sword 13. If these words were spoken by anyone else, they might have already spoken out in ridicule. But these words were spoken by Sword 13, an expert from Blade Sect, a power in the foreign lands that wasn't inferior to Skywolf Fort. Sword 13, what do you mean by this? Ning Kan's face sank as Sword 13's words had undoubtedly slapped him on the face in public, so how could he endure it? Sword 13, this is the Skywolf Fort and not your Blade Sect. Feng Wei spoke angrily as well. What do I mean? Sword 13 disregarded Feng Wei and looked at Ning Kan as he said indifferently, Ning Kan, didn't you clearly hear what I meant? You don't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as your disciple. Ning Kan's expression became even darker when he heard this. Sword 13, today is the day of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, so I won't argue with you, but this doesn't mean that I, Ning Kan, am afraid of you. Whether I have the qualifications to become Duan Lingtian's master isn't something you can interfere in. After he finished speaking, Ning Kan paid no further attention to Sword 13. It's good to be confident, but I'm just afraid some people are overestimating their ability, am I right, Duan Lingtian? As he finished speaking, Sword 13 intentionally glanced at Duan Lingtian and caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but laugh bitterly, yet he didn't answer Sword 13. If he were to speak the truth now, it would undoubtedly offend Ning Kan. If he lied, then not to mention he wouldn't do it, but even if he did, it would offend Sword 13. Moreover, Sword 13 was a senior that he respected, so it was impossible for him to offend Sword 13. So, he chose to keep silent. Subsequently, the measuring continued. On the side of the Darken Dynasty, only Feng Tianwu remained, and after Feng Tianwu walked out, it once again drew the gazes of many people present in the surroundings. Heavens! Could it be that the Darken Dynasty really has nobody else? This person is even younger than Duan Lingtian, and she's even a woman. Looks like the Darken Dynasty has really declined. The young geniuses and representatives of the various dynasties sighed with emotion, and their words seemed as if they looked down extremely upon Feng Tianwu. When facing these emotional sighs, Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed as a faint smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. If these fellows knew Feng Tianwu's strength now, they'd probably not think like this. Whoosh! Meanwhile, Feng Tianwu's hand had already been placed on the age measuring pearl, and 5 yellow ribbons appeared on it to indicate her current age, 25 years old. This age was also the youngest age amongst the young geniuses from the 10 dynasties that had come to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, and it was sufficient to shock anyone. 25 years old, I hadn't even stepped into the void initiation stage when I was 25. Even though it shows that there's no capable people in the younger generation of the Darken Dynasty, since a woman like this has obtained the qualification to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, but I presume this woman is a martial artist at the void initiation stage as well. This natural talent can be considered to be not bad. Especially because she's a woman, and she's much better than I was all those years ago. In next to no time, a wave of discussion arose in the surroundings, and besides the group of people from the Darken dynasty, at least 90% of the people present doubted Feng Tianwu's strength, whereas, Feng Tianwu didn't mind as well. She would use her strength to make all these people who looked down upon her shut their mouths. A crowd of short-sighted people, pitiable. Duan Lingtian muttered to himself as he glanced indifferently at those people that looked down on Feng Tianwu. 788 Chapter 789, Illusory Purgatory. But truthfully speaking, her appearance is still not bad. A woman with such an appearance is rarely seen in the world, and it's the first time in my life that I've seen such a beauty. The eyes of a young genius from the Darming dynasties narrowed as he looked at Feng Tianwu with a covetous gaze. Her appearance is drop-dead gorgeous, and she possesses a cultivation at the void initiation stage. A woman like this is rarely seen, and it would surely be fortune the person that obtained her had accumulated from his past lifetime. Another person spoke out. If I can ride a woman like this under my legs, then it would surely be an extremely wonderful thing. Another young genius from Darming dynasty looked at Feng Tianwu and stuck out his tongue to lick his dry lips, and he spoke with a lustful expression. You're courting death. At the instant that Feng Tianwu's face went livid, Duan Lingtian's expression went grim as he shouted out furiously before flashing out to sweep towards the young genius from Darming dynasty that spoke rudely. But even though Duan Lingtian's speed was swift, someone was even faster. Swish! A brief sword howl resounded out abruptly. Before everyone could react, a bloody hold had already appeared on the neck of the young genius from the Darming dynasty. Blood sprayed out ceaselessly, and the Darming dynasty's young geniuses that spoke rudely earlier still maintained his original actions, yet his entire body was completely devoid of signs of life. Along with this Darming dynasty's young genius's corpse crashing on the ground, a wave of ear-piercing sounds of air exploding resounded out. In the next moment, a terrifying gale that swept out from a palm blasted the corpse into powder that dispersed into the heavens and the earth. Whoosh! At the same time, a tall red-colored figure appeared and stood in the sky. It was precisely Feng Wudao. Duan Lingtian stopped moving when he saw Feng Wudao had killed the person that disrespected Feng Tianwu, and his expression eased up slightly, yet his eyes still contained frightful coldness. His eyes that were filled with coldness flashed past the 8 remaining young geniuses of the Darming dynasty one by one. Feng Wudao, you actually dare kill a member of my Darming dynasty. The Darming dynasty's Zhao clan's elder Qian went grim in expression as he stared at Feng Wudao, yet he didn't dare make any movements. Because he knew that he was far from being a match to Feng Wudao. 2 days ago, when the Skywolf Fort's vice fort master, Feng Wei, and the Dongguo clan's patriarch, Dongguo Lei, had come looking for trouble with Duan Lingtian, Feng Wudao had once revealed his cultivation. At that time, he was present. He deserved death. Feng Wudao glanced indifferently at Elder Qian. The instant he spoke disrespectfully to my daughter, his life didn't belong to himself any longer. You, Elder Qian was instantly exasperated when he heard this, yet he was unable to say anything, because everyone had heard that it was their Darming dynasty that was in the wrong. But never had he imagined that Feng Wudao would make a move and kill a young genius of their Darming dynasty just because of something the young genius had said. The Darken dynasty's Feng Wudao was really as overbearing as the rumors said. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as his gaze descended onto all the young geniuses of the Darming dynasty, and at the first possible moment, he noticed that the Darming dynasty's crown prince, Lu Yong, had suddenly looked towards Feng Wei. Feng Wei was currently the master of Lu Yong. It wasn't difficult for Duan Lingtian to guess that Lu Yong was surely saying something to Feng Wei via voice transmission now, and the biggest possibility was that he was asking Feng Wei to stand out for the Darming dynasty. The facts proved that Duan Lingtian had guessed correctly. After Feng Wudao returned to their group, Feng Wei took a step forward, and his cold gaze descended onto Feng Wudao as he said in a low voice, killing a guest of our Skywolf Fort in our Skywolf Fort, a void transformation stage martial artist from just a tiny dynasty actually dares be so brazen. You're courting death. As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Wei took a step forward as the origin energy on his body skyrocketed, and it seemed to have transformed into a ball of raging flames that enveloped him within it, causing him to seem overbearing. Besides that, his gaze locked onto Feng Wudao at the first possible moment. Right when he intended to make a move. Swoosh! A figure instantly vanished on the spot, and when it appeared once more, it was already before Feng Wudao and had firmly protected Feng Wudao behind it. This person's appearance caused Feng Wei's expression to go grim, and he shouted out furiously at the same time. Sword 13, what's the meaning of this? The person that had appeared before Feng Wudao was exactly Sword 13. Sword 13 had a calm expression when facing Feng Wei's question. Feng Wei, you're intending to make a move against an elder of my House of Swords right before my eyes. Could it be that I can't interfere? Everyone present had clearly heard and seen what happened earlier, and you know who was right and who was wrong in your heart. If you really want to make a move against an elder of my House of Swords because of this, then even if you have the Skywolf fort behind you, my House of Swords will similarly not stop until one of us dies. Not stop until one of us dies. As Sword 13 finished speaking, his tone was filled with coldness, indifference, and killing intent, and it caused Feng Wei's expression to be exceedingly livid. The House of Swords won't stop until either one of us dies. Not to mention anything else, just these words of Sword 13 had caused him to feel fear from the bottom of his heart. In this border area of the foreign lands, everyone knew that House of Swords in the Blade sect was filled with a group of sword cultivators that were complete madmen. Supposedly, 100 years ago, there was a power of the foreign lands that wasn't inferior to Skywolf Fort, yet because it offended the master of the House of Swords at that time, it was slaughtered by the group of madmen sword cultivators to the point of completely going into decline. Presently, that power had already fallen to become a power that wasn't rated in the foreign lands. Sword 13 was already the internally decided next master of the House of Swords in the Blade sect, and his words were completely capable of representing the House of Swords. Once the entire House of Swords went against him, Feng Wei, then even the Skywolf fort might not be able to protect him. So when faced with Sword 13's threats, Feng Wei really didn't dare continue doing anything to Feng Wudao. Alright, this matter stops here. Ning Can spoke out to break the deathly silent atmosphere at the scene, and at the same time, he gave Feng Wei a way out. Feng Wei took a deep breath and glanced coldly at Sword 13 and Feng Wudao before retreating back to the place he stood earlier. At the same time, all the people that were discussing Feng Tianwu without restraint had shut their mouths successively, and they looked at Feng Tianwu as if she was a dreadful monster. Vice Fort Master, there's no problem with all of them. In next to no time, the 10 elders of Skywolf Fort put away the age-measuring pearls before returning to stand behind Feng Wei and Ning Can, and then they reported respectfully. Ning Can nodded, and then he looked at all the representatives and young geniuses of the 10 dynasties in the surroundings. Now, I announce that the martial competition of the 10 dynasties officially begins. Instantly, the gazes of all the young geniuses present lit up successively, and their faces were filled with anticipation. They'd traveled a long distance to come here for the sake of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Supposedly, the people that become eminent in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties were even able to obtain generous rewards like grade 3 spirit weapons, medicinal pills, concept fragments, and other things bestowed by Skywolf Fort. The first round of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties will be held here. Suddenly, Ning Can raised his head to look even higher above in the sky of the combat arena as he spoke slowly. For a time, the gazes of everyone converged over, and in the end, they weren't able to see anything. The horizon was filled with the blue sky and white clouds, and they couldn't discern anything was amiss. Only a single person noticed an inkling. What a complicated inscription formation. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he was slightly surprised. When Ning Can had spoken and raised his head to look even higher in the sky, Duan Lingtian had followed Ning Can's gaze to look up, and then his spiritual force flashed out, allowing him to notice an inkling. It turned out that a complicated inscription formation was concealed there, and it was difficult for even Duan Lingtian's spiritual force to fuse into it. This inscription formation is obviously the work of an expert at the martial monarch stage. With my current spiritual force, I'm utterly unable to peek into it. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed this. How formidable was the spiritual force of a martial monarch stage expert, and an inscription formation formed from inscriptions that were inscribed from this spiritual force was utterly not something his current spiritual force could peek into. Even if he possessed the lifetime worth of memories of the rebirth martial emperor that related to the Tao of inscriptions, he was still helpless. Even though his spiritual force was currently at the 4th level of the void interpretation stage, but it was still too weak before an inscription formation constructed by an expert at the martial monarch stage. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian noticed other formidable spiritual forces stretching out, and it caused him to have no choice but to hurriedly withdraw his own spiritual force. The other 9 dynasties really people with unusual ability concealed within. These spiritual forces are obviously the spiritual forces of inscription masters at the void transformation stage. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, and he couldn't help but feel fearful in his heart. Obviously, the representatives of the 10 dynasties were inscription masters, and even if their level in the art of inscription was limited, they were inscription masters after all, and could roughly control their spiritual force. Whoosh! In next to no time, everyone including Duan Lingtian clearly saw that the Vice Fort Master Ning Clan withdraw an ancient copper mirror. The copper mirror seemed ordinary, yet Duan Lingtian was able to guess that it was surely extraordinary. Subsequently, origin energy bloomed out from Ning Can's hand and fused into the copper mirror. Instantly, a material red light shot out explosively from within the copper mirror, and the red light illuminated the sky and actually caused the winds and clouds above to roil before finally converging into a ball of material clouds and mist. An inscription formation. Instantly, many people discerned the profundity of the ball of clouds and mist, and amongst these people included Feng Wudao and Feng Tianwu, who'd once seen a similar inscription formation. Exactly. This is an inscription formation. Ning can put away the copper mirror in his hand that had activated the inscription formation, and then he looked at the young geniuses in the surroundings. This inscription formation is the place all of you will be undergoing the first round of selections. All of you will enter into it and enter an illusory realm that belongs to all of you. Ning Can's words were obviously spoken to the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties that were present. Illusory realm. Ning Can's words caused most people to be slightly puzzled, whereas, Duan Lingtian's gaze couldn't help but light up instead. Illusory realms weren't unfamiliar to him as the sole skill, thousand illusions, that he possessed was capable of constructing an illusory space at will. Within that illusory space, anyone who had a spiritual force that was inferior to him would be equivalent to a lamb waiting to be slaughtered by him. Within the illusory space he created, he was the absolute ruler. In our Skywolf Fort, that illusory realm has another name, illusory purgatory. Ning Can continued. Illusory purgatory. The people present felt panicked in their hearts for no reason or rhyme when they heard this name. 789 Chapter 790, Soul Suppression Formation. Illusory purgatory is like its name. Once you enter it, it would be equivalent to entering a world that's like purgatory. After all 94 of you enter into it, only 50 people can survive in the end and obtain the qualifications to participate in the second round of the selections. Right when everyone was terrified by the illusory purgatory, Ning Can spoke once more, and he revealed the rules of the first round of the selections. Only 50 people can survive from the 94 that enter. Instantly, many young men couldn't help but go pale. Doesn't that mean that 44 people had to die? Some young geniuses that were at the bottom in their respective dynasties were terrified to the point their faces went ghastly pale, and for a time, they slightly regretted coming to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Vice Fort Master, can we withdraw ourselves? In next to no time, a young man asked with a trembling voice. He was in existence at the bottom amongst the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties, and he knew that he would most probably die once he entered the illusory purgatory. Along with this young man raising this question, many people looked at Ning Can and Feng Wei with expressions of anticipation. Obviously, they had the intention of withdrawing as well. What a joke! Even though the rewards of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties were extremely generous, if they were asked to fight for it with their lives, then it was impossible for them to be willing to do that. As far as they were concerned, there was nothing that was more important than their own lives, as once they'd lost their lives, then no matter how generous the rewards were, it would be useless because they were utterly unable to use it. Withdraw. Feng Wei glanced indifferently at this young man and nodded. You can. Right when the gazes of many young geniuses lit up, Feng Wei's following words caused their expressions to go pale in unison. But the person that withdraws must withstand an attack of mine on their own. So long as you're able to survive it, then you can leave safely. What a joke! Withstand a strike from Feng Wei. Feng Wei was the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort and seemed to be in existence at the 7th level of the Void Transformation stage or above. Not to mention all of them who weren't confident in themselves, it would be impossible for even the most outstanding young geniuses in the 10 dynasties to withstand a strike of Feng Wei's and survive. Instantly, the bodies of many people started to tremble, and they were filled with terror towards what was going to happen next. Seeming to have realized that the atmosphere wasn't right, Ning Can continued. Of course, it's not completely reliant on strength when you enter the illusory purgatory. If you're capable of smoothly avoiding all the other martial artists, then even if your strength is the weakest, you'll similarly be able to survive once the other 44 people are killed. Ning Can's words caused the young geniuses that felt despaired to return to their senses, and their eyes lit up. This works as well. We don't have to undergo a battle royal as soon as we enter. Perhaps he discerned the bewilderment of these young geniuses. Ninkan continued. The illusory purgatory was constructed a few thousands of years ago via an inscription formation by a martial monarch stage inscription master who was a friend of the fort master of our Skywolf fort at that time. Once you enter into it, it's equivalent to entering a vast world. At that place, mountains and forests cover the land, and there are many places that you can use to conceal yourselves. Ninkan finished speaking in one go. An inscription master at the martial monarch stage. Ning Kan's words caused everyone besides Duan Lingtian to be shocked. Never had they imagined that this illusory purgatory had such great origins, and it was actually constructed by a martial monarch stage expert of legend. Not to mention martial emperor stage experts, even martial monarch stage experts were existences of legend to the members of the 10 dynasties, and they were existences that were far beyond their reach. Vice Fort Master, will all of us appear in the same place after we enter? Someone couldn't help but ask. Instantly, his questions resonated with many people, and they were filled with curiousness towards this. If they were to appear in the same place, then wouldn't the weakest people amongst them become lambs that were waiting to be slaughtered? That was something that they weren't willing to see. Don't worry, once all of you enter the illusory purgatory, even though all of you will appear in the same world, yet all of you won't appear in the same place. Every single one of you will at least be 500 kilometers away from the closest person to you, and there's perfectly enough time for all of you to conceal yourselves. Ninkan continued. So, in the first round of the selections in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, the young experts with confidence in themselves would control the battlefield, and they had to find the weak people that are concealed and kill them. Only after they kill 44 people would they be sent out from the illusory purgatory. Of course, all of you can choose to cooperate with someone you trust inside the illusory purgatory. For example, a few comparatively weaker people can join forces to deal with a stronger person. Ning Kan's words caused the gazes of many young geniuses with weaker strengths to light up. If we join forces, I'm afraid we can only join forces with people from the same dynasty. Yeah, if we join forces with people from the other dynasties, we might be stabbed from the back, unless we make a vow under the 9 heavenly tribulation. Many young geniuses discussed animatedly. Right, I have to warn all of you of something. You're unable to make a vow with your blood in the illusory purgatory, as the 9 heavenly tribulation is unable to sense your existences within the illusory purgatory. Ninkan added. Instantly the faces of many people sank, and some of them wore distressed expressions. Looks like we're really only able to choose to join forces with people from the same dynasty. Even if it's a person from the same dynasty, who dares say that everyone is worthy of being trusted? Unless it's someone you yourself can trust, anyone else can't be trusted. Yeah, after all, only after waiting for 44 people to die would the other people be able to leave the illusory purgatory and survive while passing through the first round of the selections. For the sake of passing through the first round of the selections, there'll surely be many people that would stop at nothing. After all, every increase in casualties meant that their own safety would be even more guaranteed. Many young geniuses with comparatively weaker strength had slightly distressed expressions for a time. Looks like our plan to join forces from before has failed. I never imagined that after we enter that illusory purgatory, we'll actually be split up. Zhang Shouyong looked at Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, and Su Li as he sighed. After we enter, all of you must try your best to protect yourselves, so long as we're able to meet each other inside the illusory purgatory, then joining forces at that time wouldn't be too late. If all 4 of us are able to gather, then passing through the first round of this life and death selection would be extremely easy, said Su Li. As far as he was concerned, so long as the 4 of them gathered together, then with Duan Lingtian's unfathomable, demonic technique, the young geniuses of the various dynasties would absolutely be unable to get the upper hand against them. Exactly. After we enter, everyone must be sure to be careful. If you don't have sufficient confidence, then you must absolutely not make a move. Duan Lingtian spoke with a serious expression. Once they entered the illusory purgatory, it would be equivalent to entering into a purgatory in the mortal world. Even though it didn't contain vicious and ferocious monsters, yet it contained young experts of the various dynasties that would possibly appear at any moment to kill them. A single mistake would be extremely likely to cause one to fall into a bottomless abyss and perish within it. Feng Tianwu didn't speak, but she'd listened to what Duan Lingtian and Su Li said, and she directly nodded to indicate she understood. All of you, enter. The copper mirror appeared once more in Ning Can's hands as he spoke, and his origin energy fused into it. Whoosh! This time, the blue-colored strong light shot out from the surface of the mirror, and it just happened to hit precisely on the ball of material clouds and mist in the sky. Instantly, the clouds and mist roiled as they split open to reveal a rift, and it seemed as if a door had been opened. Swoosh! Right when most young geniuses were hesitant, a figure had instantly entered into the illusory purgatory like a bolt of lightning. Feng Wei, this disciple of yours is not bad indeed. No matter if it's strength or courage, he's extremely outstanding in both. Ning Can praised. The first person to enter was precisely the crown prince of Darming dynasty, Lu Yong. Martial uncle, you're too kind. Even though Feng Wei spoke modestly, yet his face revealed a brilliant smile. Go on. Sword 13 and Saber 5 looked respectfully at Su Li and Long Yun. Su Li and Long Yun nodded, and then they seemed as if they were competing and entered the illusory purgatory at practically the exact same time. We ought to go as well. Duan Ling Tian smiled to Feng Tianwu and Zhang Shouyang before entering the illusory purgatory with some of the young geniuses from the various dynasties that had returned to their senses. After Duan Ling Tian entered, Feng Tianwu, Zhang Shouyang, and the remaining group of young geniuses entered successively. After a short moment, a total of 94 young geniuses had all entered the illusory purgatory. The group of experts of the older generation stood silently outside as they waited for the outcome. After Duan Ling Tian stepped into the illusory purgatory, the area before him was covered by a layer of mist, and even if his spiritual force stretched out, it would be directly blasted to dispersion by a shapeless force within a short period of time. After flying for an unknown period of time, the mist before Duan Ling Tian's eyes dispersed, allowing him to be able to look straight at the world before him. This is the illusory purgatory. Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but laugh bitterly as he looked at the high mountains and lofty peaks that covered the complex terrain. If someone has the intention of hiding in a place like this, I presume that it'll be even more difficult than ascending the heavens to drag the person out of his hiding place. But, luckily, I can rely on my spiritual force. With my spiritual force, I can envelop an area of 100 meters and anyone that's concealed in the shadows will be unable to escape. When I came here earlier, there was a pressure that blasted my spiritual force into dispersal. This place ought to not have that pressure, right? When he thought up to here, Duan Ling Tian stretched his spiritual force out. In the next moment, his spirited face sank completely. His spiritual force had once again been blasted into dispersal by the pressure. What's going on? Duan Ling Tian frowned and had a puzzled expression as he utterly didn't know what was going on, nor did he know where this pressure originated from. Only after Duan Ling Tian searched through the lifetime's worth of memories of the rebirth martial emperor did Duan Ling Tian find the answer. Looks like the illusory purgatory within this inscription formation constructed by the martial monarch stage expert also has a soul suppression formation set up within it. As its name soul suppression says, it suppresses the energy of the soul. Spiritual force was the energy of the soul. In this way, even my soul skill, 1,000 illusions, can't be utilized in this damnable place. In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian's expression sank slightly. When his spiritual force fused into the soul brand in the depths of his soul with the intention of trying to utilize his soul skill, 1,000 illusions, he instead noticed that he was utterly unable to construct the illusory space. Every single time his spiritual force intended to construct the illusory space, it would be blasted to dispersal by the indescribable pressure at the first possible moment. 790 Chapter 791, The Might of the Quasi-Royal Grade Spirit Sword. As expected, Duan Ling Tian couldn't help take a deep breath. Being unable to utilize the soul skill, 1,000 illusions, also meant that he could only rely on his strength to battle the other young geniuses in this unknown illusory purgatory. When relying on the soul skill, 1,000 illusion, Duan Ling Tian wasn't afraid of any of the young geniuses from the 10 dynasties. But the problem was that he was unable to use his soul skill now. Not to mention he didn't know the ability of most of the young geniuses from the 10 dynasties, just the cultivation the Darming dynasty's crown prince, Lu Yong, revealed earlier had caused him to be extremely shocked. Third level of the void interpretation stage. Duan Ling Tian initially thought that with his cultivation at the second level of the void interpretation stage, it was sufficient to be ranked in the top amongst the young geniuses of the 10 dynasties, but he didn't dare think like this any longer after he witnessed Lu Yong's cultivation. There are always mountains beyond mountains, heavens beyond heavens. Perhaps in the other dynasties, there were young experts that possessed a cultivation at the third level of the void interpretation stage like Liu Yong, or even a fourth level void interpretation stage or young expert. The pressing matter at the moment is to first kill those young geniuses of the 10 dynasties that have comparatively weaker strengths. So long as 44 out of the 94 people are killed, I can smoothly pass through the first round of the selections and advance successfully. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed, and he didn't continue thinking about it. Whirlwind. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian seemed to have transformed into a gale that tore through the sky and headed towards the distance to search for his prey. I wonder where Tian Wu, Big Brother Zhang, and Su Li are. I can only go step by step in this unknown illusory purgatory, and I can only hope to encounter them as soon as possible. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. If I'm able to encounter that Zishang, then I must kill him no matter what. After that, I'll use the Devilseal tablet to completely annihilate the incomplete soul that seems to belong to a martial emperor stage expert in his body. On the way, Duan Lingtian's eyes flickered with cold lights when he thought about Zishang. Even though the Devilseal tablet was capable of temporarily suppressing the incomplete soul that seemed to belong to a martial emperor stage expert in Zishang's body, who knew if Zishang would obtain some benefits because of that martial emperor stage expert? As far as he was concerned, if Zishang was eliminated, then Zishang would sooner or later become a great calamity, as the situation between him and Zishang had long since become a situation that wouldn't end without the death of one party. Zishang, I only hope your luck isn't that good, Duan Lingtian muttered to himself. Presently, he wasn't worried about anything else, and he was only worried that he wouldn't be able to encounter Zishang. After flying for some time, Duan Lingtian slowed down because he noticed that a wave of sounds of the air exploding was sounded out from far ahead in the distance. Obviously, someone was battling. It wasn't difficult for Duan Lingtian to guess that people had encountered each other and started to fight. Instantly, Duan Lingtian maintained a low profile as he moved to conceal himself behind a faraway precipice, and then he silently watched the intense battle in the distance. 2 young men were battling each other, and they were evenly matched. When he saw the ancient horned dragon silhouettes that appeared in the sky when the 2 of them fought, it wasn't difficult for Duan Lingtian to discern their cultivations. 2 9th-level void initiation stage martial artists. After he confirmed their cultivations, Duan Lingtian didn't hesitate any longer and directly left the precipice to transform into a gal that arrived nearby the battlefield in a short moment. Duan Lingtian didn't have an impression of the 2 young men that were in battle, but he could be sure that they weren't members of the Darken Dynasty, Darming Dynasty, and Darchu Dynasty. Duan Lingtian knew all the people from the Darken Dynasty, whereas, because of Zhao Weiyi, he'd carefully looked at all the members of Darming Dynasty, so he had a deep impression of them. As for the members of the Darchu Dynasty, because of the young men that had come into conflict with him and Zhang Shouyang at the restaurant outside Skywolf Fort that day, he'd also looked carefully at them and remembered their appearances. After Duan Lingtian appeared, he didn't attack directly, but stood silently at the side instead as he looked at the scene before him with a calm gaze. The 2 young men who were deeply absorbed in the battle fought for a while longer before successively realizing something had changed. When they noticed someone was standing nearby out of the corners of their eyes, both of them were grim and split apart with tacit agreement, and then they retreated to stand in the distance before hurriedly withdrawing healing medicinal pills at the same time and consuming them. After they consumed the medicinal pills and slightly absorbed its medicinal strength, the 2 of them looked over at the same time towards the person that was suddenly standing nearby. With a single glance, their pupils couldn't help but constrict. Duan Lingtian, the violet-clothed young man before them, wasn't unfamiliar to them, and he could even be said to be extremely familiar to them. 2 days ago, they'd clearly seen the Skywolf Fort's vice-fort master, Feng Wei, and the Dongguo clan's patriarch, Dongguo Lei, come look for Duan Lingtian. Besides that, they'd paid attention to Duan Lingtian before they'd entered the illusory purgatory, and they knew that Duan Lingtian was a young expert of the Darken Dynasty and was only 28 years old now. Even though Duan Lingtian was young and they hadn't witnessed Duan Lingtian's ability, yet somehow, traces of terror arose in their hearts for no reason or rhyme. Let's join forces and kill him first before continuing our battle. How about it? Suddenly, one of the young men asked the other young man, and he wanted to join forces and deal with Duan Lingtian. All right, the other person didn't refuse and agreed resolutely. The pressure Duan Lingtian gave him was far greater than his opponent, and it caused him to have no choice but to be cautious. You take the left, I'll take the right, we'll jointly launch a pincer attack on him. The young man that put forward the suggestion to join forces communicated with the other young man via voice transmission before directly pouncing towards Duan Lingtian's left side with the intention of attacking from there. The other young man didn't dare dally and seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that instantly shot towards Duan Lingtian's right. Swish. One used a sword, the other a blade, and they attacked Duan Lingtian from both sides. Origin energy sword lights and saber lights raged and contained fierce and sharp sword concept and saber concept as they arrived before Duan Lingtian like shadows. From the beginning until the end, Duan Lingtian had a carefree expression when facing the two young men that joined forces, and he seemed as if his expression wouldn't change even if Mt. Tai collapsed before him, causing him to possess the bearing of an expert. Only after both the two people arrived from left and right, and their dazzling sword lights and fierce saber lightly approached closely on either side did vast origin energy gush out from Duan Lingtian's body. Bang! Terrifying origin energy whistled out from Duan Lingtian's body and seemed to have transformed into a ball of milky white flames that shot into the sky. At the same time, the milky white flames shook before transformed into waves of material strong wings that coiled around Duan Lingtian's body as they flashed out as if they'd transformed into a layer of a defensive barrier. Clang, 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 the dazzling sword light and fierce saber light arrived like shadows and descended onto the material strong wings that surrounded and flashed about around Duan Lingtian's body before being annihilated successively. The strong winds around Duan Lingtian's body were like an impregnable wall before the sword light and saber lights. The strength of the sword light and saber light were utterly not on the same level when compared with the strength contained within this wall, and it was simply like the difference between the heavens and the earth. After their strike came to nothing, both the young men didn't continue launching attacks, and they instead stood nearby Duan Lingtian's side with expression that went pale. Materialization of concept, both of them exclaimed in shock at the same time. Materialization of concept was the symbol of the void interpretation stage. Even though a similar scene could appear when void initiation concept was comprehended to the limit, there was a difference. They were extremely sure that the wind concept Duan Lingtian utilized now was precisely a void interpretation concept. Subsequently, they seemed as if they'd discussed it earlier as they raised their heads to look at the sky above Duan Lingtian in unison, and they seemed as if they wanted to confirm something. The energy of the heavens and the earth roiled in the sky above Duan Lingtian before transforming into material phenomenon of the heavens and the earth. Numerous ancient horned dragon silhouettes coiled down, and their number was so numerous that it terrified the two young men, to the point their faces went ghastly pale as their bodies started trembling. Heavens! What have I seen? 50 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. This is only the phenomenon of the heavens and the earth formed after he merely utilized his origin energy in one type of concept. Second level of the void interpretation stage, first level intermediate wind concept, Duan Lingtian's strength is actually so strong. Their expressions were extremely unsightly. Never had they imagined that Duan Lingtian, who was only 28 years of age, would actually possess such a formidable strength that far surpassed them. With Duan Lingtian's strength, Duan Lingtian would be able to kill them with extreme ease. Now, it ought to be my turn. Duan Lingtian looked at the two young men that jointly attacked him and grinned, and with a raise of his hand, a sword that emitted a terrifying aura appeared in his hand. This sword, as soon as the sword in Duan Lingtian's hand appeared, it caused the hearts of the two young men to palpitate, and the aura that was faintly revealed from this sword caused them to be unable to help but be terrified. Whoosh! After Duan Lingtian's origin energy fused into the sword in his hand and another 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared out of thin air in the sky above Duan Lingtian, it caused their pupils to be unable to refrain from constricting. Duan Lingtian was a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist, and when his entire origin energy exploded out, it would be comparable to the strength of 30 ancient horned dragon. Yet now, just this sword had allowed his origin energy to obtain an amplification of 30 ancient horned dragons. Wasn't this an amplification of 100%? Even if it was the first-grade spirit sword of legend, it seems to only provide an amplification of around 88%, right? Right when both of them felt deep disbelief, Duan Lingtian attacked. 9 Dragons Radiant Flash. As soon as his sword struck out, he utilized his sword concept to execute the high-grade heaven-rank offensive martial skill, 9 Dragons Radiant Flash, that he'd just mastered not too long ago. 2 material divine dragons whistled out and contained the strength of 81 ancient horned dragon, and their eyes flashed as 4 dazzling flashes instantly flew out. Before both of them could react, the 4 flashes had penetrated between their brows and on their throats, causing their origin energy to instantly be extinguished. In the next moment, 2 corpses crashed down to the ground. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian chased up and removed their spatial rings from their hands before taking possession of them. At the same time, he looked at the 3-foot-long blade in his hand as a brilliant smile suffused his face. This quasi-royal grade spirit swords amplifies strength by 100%, that instant when I struck out was really satisfying. The quasi-royal grade spirit sword was precisely the sword he's obtained from the Sword Monarch's treasure that day. The sword was refined by the Rebirth Martial Emperor and had passed through a few hands before falling into Duan Lingtian's hands, and it could be said that he indeed possessed extremely strange fate with the Rebirth Martial Emperor in his lifetime. Of course, this fate was something that the Rebirth Martial Emperor would surely not want if he was still alive. 791 Chapter 792, The Heart of the Strong. I wonder what's the results of the battles of others. 2 people have died here, so there are another 42 people left. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he flew towards the distance and continued searching for his next target. Of course, he'd maintained a low profile and was careful all along the way. He rarely took the initiative to attack and mostly concealed himself at the side of the other person, and he only made a move after he noticed that the other person wasn't a threat to him. All along the next part of the way, another 3 young men had died at Duan Lingtian's hands. Amongst them was a member of the Darming dynasty that had once attacked him at the 9th floor of the Iceflame Pavilion in Darming dynasty, and the person could be said to be an old acquaintance of his. Swish! With a raise of his hand, Duan Lingtian executed the 9 dragons' radiant flash, causing 4 bloody holes penetrated by the flashes to appear on another young man before he perished. The lives of man are really lowly like weeds in this world. After he put away his opponent's spatial ring, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Of course, Duan Lingtian knew clearly in his heart that if he encountered an existence that was stronger than him now, then his life would similarly be lowly like a blade of grass and be nothing worth mentioning. It was precisely because of this that every time Duan Lingtian attacked and killed someone, slight fear would arise in his heart. Only by standing at the peak of this work and surpassing everyone would I not have to worry that someone would trample upon me beneath their feet or take my life to be lowly like a weed. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's heart of the strong became even more firmer, and his gaze that stared concentrated into the distance became even fiercer. He wanted to become one that was strong. One that stood above everyone and stood at the peak while looking down onto the myriad of beings in the world. This was his greatest aspiration, and he wouldn't have any regrets even until his death. All along the way, Duan Lingtian obtained a certain level of understanding towards this illusory purgatory as well. It was a place that was completely constructed from inscription formations, and everything within it was an illusion. Of course, to people that were within the inscription formation, everything was no different than real things. Up until now, there were a total of 5 young geniuses of the various dynasties that had died at his hands, whereas, after the corpses of these young men fell onto the ground, all of them would strangely vanish. Duan Lingtian knew that those corpses hadn't vanished, but had instead left the illusory purgatory and appeared outside the inscription formation of this illusory realm. Just like Duan Lingtian had thought, after every short period of time, there would be a corpse that would fly out from the inscription formation that looked like a ball of mist and clouds that had converged together, and then the corpse would fall heavily on the combat arena. Every time a corpse appeared, it was caused the faces of the representatives of the various dynasties to sink. Up until now, every single dynasty had casualties, and the only difference was the amount. The corpses on the combat arena were piled up in 10 different places, and amongst them, the corpses of the Darken dynasty were the least, as there was only a single corpse. The person that had died was a 7th-level Void Initiation stage martial artist that had entered the top 10 by luck during the Dynasty Martial competition on that day. But unfortunately, even though he'd obtained the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, he'd died far away from home. Even though his cultivation had improved greatly after a year of time, it had only improved to the 8th level of the Void Initiation stage, and he was in existence at the bottom amongst the group of young geniuses from the 10 dynasties. This also caused him to be bound to the fate of being a prey in the first round's life and death selection in the illusory purgatory. Once a prey didn't conceal himself well, he would be bound to be hunted down and killed. Which dynasty is over there? In the sky above the combat arena, the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Kan, looked at the corpse that lay alone at the side of the combat arena. Vice Fort Master, that's a member of the Darkin Dynasty. An elder of Skywolf Fort spoke respectfully. Darkin Dynasty, the dynasty that Duan Lingtian is from. Ning Can's eyes lit up when he heard this. Yes, the elder nodded. Up until now, there are already 23 people that have died. Only another 21 people are required before the remaining people can pass through the first round of the selections. Ning Can looked at the corpses that were divided into 10 areas and said slowly, if Duan Lingtian is really capable of making it through this first round of the selections, then no matter what method he used to make it through, he has the qualifications to become my personal disciple. Even though Ning Can's voice wasn't loud, yet it entered into the ears of everyone present. But besides the representatives of the Darkin Dynasty, the others seemed to be slightly absent-minded, and they didn't continue being envious or jealous of Duan Lingtian. Because of the successive deaths of the young geniuses from their dynasties, the representatives of the other 9 dynasties had unsightly expressions and utterly didn't have the mood to care about anything else. HMPH. A cold snort resounded out, and Sword 13 glanced at Ning Can with disdain. Ning Can, you face is really thick-skinned. I'll say what I said earlier, you don't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as your disciple. Sword 13, whether I have the qualifications or not isn't up to you. Ning Can refused to show weakness and looked Sword 13 in the eyes. As far as he was concerned, if someone as respected as him, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, wanted to take a young man from a tiny dynasty as his personal disciple, then wouldn't the young man be extremely excited as he knelt down and kowtowed before him? We'll see. Sword 13 spoke indifferently, and the space between his brows was filled with strong confidence. Martial uncle. Right at this moment, Feng Wei, who stood by Ning Can's side, seemed to have thought of something, and he frowned before sending a voice transmission to Ning Can. There's something I forgot to tell you. Duan Lingtian seemed to be a good friend of Sword 13's disciple. 2 days ago, subsequently, Feng Wei spoke of the matter about him and the Dongguo clan's patriarch, Dongguo Lei, going to look for Duan Lingtian, including the matter about him wanting to allow Dongguo Lei to take Duan Lingtian away, yet Sword 13 had stood out to protect Duan Lingtian. What? Feng Wei's words caused Ning Can's expression to be unable to help but go grim. If it wasn't for Feng Wei speaking of it now, he would be utterly unaware of this incident. Never had he imagined that their Skywolf Fort had already given Duan Lingtian such a bad impression before this. Meanwhile, he finally realized why Sword 13 would be so confident that Duan Lingtian wouldn't be willing to become his disciple. So it turns out that all of this has a cause and effect. You've very likely kept out a rare genius martial artist for the sake of a tiny Dongguo Lei. Ning Can's eyes contained a trace of rage as he looked at Feng Wei. Feng Wei neither agreed nor disagreed. Martial uncle, perhaps Duan Lingtian's natural talent isn't bad, but with his age, I presume it's impossible for him to have any great accomplishments. Moreover, once he enters that place, he's bound to fall to the fate of being cannon fodder. It's utterly impossible for him to survive. So, even if you can't take him as your personal disciple, Martial uncle doesn't have to feel regretful about it, said Feng Wei. That depends on the situation at that time. If I give up like this, it would instead cause Sword 13 to look down on me. As for Duan Lingtian, if he really isn't sensible, then he's bound to perish. As Ning Can finished speaking via voice transmission, a cold light flashed within his eyes. Swoosh. Suddenly, another corpse flashed out from the inscription formation and plunged down from the ground before smashing heavily on the ground. Yi Xiao. The pupils of the Darkin Dynasty's emperor constricted. Even though he wasn't surprised that a second young genius of the Darkin Dynasty would be killed, yet he never imagined that the second person would be Yi Xiao. Yi Xiao was a person that was ranked in the top 10 in the dynasty martial competition at any rate, and in terms of cultivation, he seemed to be even above the emperor's son, Bai He. Presently, Yi Xiao even had a cultivation at the void interpretation stage, yet had still died. Of course, he thought that it was because Yi Xiao was unfortunate. As far as he was concerned, Su Li, Long Yun, and Feng Tianwu were all weaker than Yi Xiao. But all 3 of them hadn't died, yet Yi Xiao had, so it was surely because Yi Xiao's luck wasn't good and had encountered an existence stronger than himself. If the emperor knew that Su Li, Long Yun, and Feng Tianwu's strength wasn't inferior to Yi Xiao now, he would probably not think in this way. Tianwu, Feng Wudao looked at the inscription formation, and his eyes obviously contained slight worry. Even though his daughter's natural talent and strength wasn't bad, but she was facing the young experts of the various dynasties now, and there was no lack of existences that were stronger than her amongst them. Once she encountered them, she would have a slim chance of survival. I hope that kid, Ling Tian, can converge with Tian Wu as soon as possible. Feng Wudao thought in his heart. As far as he was concerned, so long as Duan Ling Tian converged with his daughter, then his daughter would be safe. Presently, amongst the group of experts of the older generation in the sky above the combat arena, only Sword 13, Saber 5, Ning Can, and Feng Wei were composed, whereas all the others had worried expressions. Ning Can, Sword 13, Saber 5, and Feng Wei had disciples that were within the illusory purgatory, and the reason they were able to be so composed was undoubtedly because they were filled with confidence towards their disciples. Even though the illusory purgatory could be considered to be different than purgatory in the realm of mortals, yet it was no different to a purgatory in the realm of mortals to those weaker martial artists that encountered stronger martial artists, because their end would practically be one of death. 3 figures flashed out to surround a young man that had a wine gourd hanging at his waist, and one of the blue-clothed young men sneered. Zhang Shouyang, enemies really are bound to meet. You, this void interpretation stage young expert of the Darken Dynasty is probably going to die here today. It's you. The person that was surrounded was precisely Zhang Shouyang. Zhang Shouyang glanced disdainfully at the blue-clothed young man, and then his gaze descended onto the other thin young man as a trace of fear faintly flashed past his eyes. He was more or less slightly afraid of this young genius from the Darchu dynasty. At that day in the restaurant outside the Skywolf Fort, he'd already met this person once, and at that time, he'd noticed how terrifying this young man was, and that this young man was probably not inferior to him in cultivation. As for the blue-clothed young man, he utterly didn't take the young man seriously. Zhang Shouyang, you're dead for sure today. Let's me tell you, amongst the 3 of us, besides me, Big Brother Kong and Big Brother Shao are both existences at the first level of the void interpretation stage, especially Big Brother Kong. He has even comprehended second-level void interpretation concept, so killing you is extremely easy. The blue-clothed young man laughed coldly as he looked at Zhang Shouyang. Second-level void interpretation concept. Zhang Shouyang took a deep breath, and he felt his intuition was really not wrong. This thin young man was indeed extraordinary. 792 Chapter 793, at the critical moment. How is it? Are you afraid? It's too late. The blue-clothed young man had a complacent expression from borrowing the might of others when he saw the change in Zhang Shouyang's expression. Even if I'm afraid, it isn't of you. Zhang Shouyang glanced at the blue-clothed young man with disdain, and then he raised the wine gourd from his waist, had poured wine down his mouth as he gulped down large mouthfuls of wine. When he saw Zhang Shouyang still had the mood to drink wine when being surrounded by them, the blue-clothed young man couldn't help but laugh coldly. Drink, drink, you're bound to drink for the last time in your lifetime. You're too noisy. Zhang Shouyang, who was drinking wine, suddenly shouted out explosively. Right when the 3 young men that surrounded him couldn't help but be shocked for a moment, he struck out swiftly. At the instant Zhang Shouyang shouted out explosively, he raised up the wine gourd that he'd accumulated strength in since long ago before fiercely smashing it down. Origin energy coiled around the wine gourd's surroundings, and it quickly fused with his earth concept to materialize and envelop the wine gourd. Swoosh! The wine gourd that had a layer of clothes put on it tore through the sky and gave rise to a wave of explosions that resounded out like thunderclaps as it flashed directly towards the blue-clothed young man. In the sky, 64 ancient horned dragon silhouettes dashed out behind him. Watch out! The thin young man and the other robust young man's expressions went grim as they transformed into 2 bolts of lightning that flashed directly towards the blue-clothed young man with the intention of rescuing him. But unfortunately, their reactions were still too slow. Zhang Shouyang's strength wasn't inferior to the 2 of them, and he attacked at the same short period of time that both of them were stunned, allowing him to gain the initiative. Bang! The wine gourd smashed onto the head of the blue-clothed young man that revealed a terrified expression, and it blasted his head apart. The blue-clothed young man that was being complacent a moment ago had become a headless corpse in the blink of an eye. Bang! 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 Comma. At the same time, Zhang Shouyang moved. Every time his legs flashed, they would step onto an enormous brick that appeared out of thin air, allowing him to gain momentum and flash out before grabbing the wine gourd that he'd smashed out in his hand. At the same time, the headless corpse plunged down to the ground and vanished within the illusory purgatory. When the headless corpse appeared outside, it caused all the experts of the older generation outside to be unable to help but feel terror in their hearts. Who exactly did this? His methods are actually so brutal. Many people gasped. I wonder from which dynasty this unfortunate fellow is from. The representatives of many dynasties frowned as they were worried this blue-clothed young man was from their dynasty. Because blue clothes were truly too ordinary, practically every dynasty had a young genius that wore clothes with this color. On the other hand, in the illusory purgatory, Zhang Shouyang who'd killed their companion under their noses caused both of the other young experts to be infuriated. I never imagined that you've already comprehended second-level void interpretation concept. The thin young man stared at Zhang Shouyang with a gloomy expression as the origin energy on his body raged, and then it transformed into red-colored flames that enveloped his entire body within it. Whoosh! In the sky above the thin young man, first 20 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared before another 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared. First level void interpretation stage. Second level intermediate fire concept. Besides that, it isn't only you who possesses a grade 3 spirit weapon. The eyes of the thin young man narrowed as a 7-foot-long spear appeared out of thin air in his hand, and at the instant the spear appeared, it was coiled around by the flames and started to tremble slightly. Whoosh! Subsequently, another 13 ancient horned dragon silhouettes and another 4,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared in the sky. Obviously, the 7-foot-long spear in the thin young man's hands was a grade 3 spirit weapon as well, but its amplification strength was far inferior to the wine gourd in Zhang Shouyang's hands. After all, the grade 3 spirit weapon wine gourd in Zhang Shouyang's hands was personally refined by Duan Lingtian, and it was capable of providing an amplification of an entire 70%, causing it to be far from something the grade 3 spirit spear in the hands of the thin young man could compare to. Remember on the road to hell that was the Darchu dynasty's Kongfang that killed you. The grade 3 spirit spear in Kongfang's hands shook and seemed like an agile python that was swinging its tail. With just the two of you. Disdain suffused the corners of Zhang Shouyang's mouth. Kongfang's strength was not bad indeed, yet the difference in spirit weapon caused Kongfang's strength to be an entire 6,000 ancient mammoths inferior to him. Even though the strength of 6,000 ancient mammoths wasn't much, yet it was a chasm that was difficult to surmount. Most importantly, Kongfang's other companion seemed to only be a first-level void interpretation stage martial artist that had comprehended first-level void interpretation concept according to the blue-clothed young man that was killed earlier. A first-level void interpretation stage martial artist like this was inferior to him by the strength of an entire 10 ancient horned dragons or more and posed no threat to him. What, you're looking down on me? The other robust young man sneered as the origin energy on his body raged before transforming into numerous material violet-colored bolt of lightning that coiled around his body, causing him to seem as if he was the god of lightning that had descended into the mortal world. Whoosh! In the sky, the phenomenon of the heavens and the earth appeared abruptly. First 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared before another 20 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared. Second level void interpretation stage. First level intermediate concept. Second level void interpretation stage. Zhang Shouyang's face went grim when he saw the strength revealed by the robust young man. To him, this second-level void interpretation stage martial artist that had comprehended first-level void interpretation concept was far more dangerous than the first-level void interpretation stage martial artist that had comprehended second-level void interpretation stage concept. Because the strength contained in origin energy could be amplified via spirit weapons. Even though I don't have a grade 3 spirit weapon, but I think that even if it's only a grade 4 spirit weapon, it's sufficient to make my strength surpass you in all respects. The cold smile on the robust young man's face grew wider as a thick and broad saber appeared in his hands. Along with the material violet-colored bolts of lightning fusing into the saber, another 17 ancient horned dragon silhouettes and a few thousand ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared in the sky. When the robust young man exerted his full strength, it had already surpassed the strength of 67 ancient horned dragons, whereas Zhang Shouyang's strength was only comparable to the strength of 64 ancient horned dragons. Xiaofeng, you suppress him, I'll take his life. Kongfang seemed to be not surprised in the slightest by the strength revealed by the robust young man, and he obviously knew very well about the robust young man's strength in his heart. Perhaps, it was precisely because of this that he would speak those words to Zhang Shouyang earlier. Remember on the road to hell that it was the Darchu dynasty's Kongfang that killed you. Xiaofeng and Kongfang moved from the front and back to seal Zhang Shouyang's paths of retreat. Zhang Shouyang's gaze flickered, and his face darkened completely. If Kongfang was joining forces with a martial artist that was only at the first level of the void interpretation stage and had comprehended first level void interpretation concept, he wouldn't be worried in the slightest. Yet now, he felt he didn't have the slightest confidence of winning. Since he didn't have the confidence to win, he didn't have the intention of going head-on with them. Flee. Without the slightest hesitation, Zhang Shouyang stomped down and instantly stepped onto the enormous brick formed out of thin air by his origin energy and earth concept before utilizing this force to fly out. Swoosh! Zhang Shouyang's entire body seemed to have transformed into a cannonball that flashed directly towards the distance, and he wanted to flee far away from here. Chase him. But unfortunately, Kong Fang and Xiao Feng were prepared long ago, and at the instant Zhang Shouyang stomped on the brick, they'd moved out to stop Zhang Shouyang a step before him. Kill. When he saw this, Zhang Shouyang realized that he had to slaughter his way out, otherwise, it would be impossible for him to flee. Bang! In the first possible moment, Zhang Shouyang chose Kong Fang, who possessed a comparatively weaker strength, and he raised his wine gourd before smashing it down right away, causing terrifying and heaven-shaking explosions of the air to resound out. Xiao Feng. Kong Fang didn't dodge when he saw this, and the grade 3 spirit spear in his hand shook yet didn't move to stop Zhang Shouyang's wine gourd but instead started to ceaselessly accumulate strength. At the critical moment, the thick and broad saber in Xiao Feng's hands that was coiled with violet-colored bolts of lightning fiercely descended onto the wine gourd in Zhang Shouyang's hands, and it blasted it away from its trajectory that would flash towards Kong Fang. Now, Kong Fang's eyes lit up and seized the opportunity that Zhang Shouyang temporarily didn't have a spirit weapon in his hands to rely on, and the grade 3 spirit spear in Kong Fang's hands that had been accumulating force since long ago swept out abruptly. Swoosh! The fiery red-colored 7-foot-long spear swept out like a flaming dragon that left its cave, and it pierced towards Zhang Shouyang with a speed so swift that it far surpassed the speed of Zhang Shouyang's movement technique. Zhang Shouyang had just moved when the 7-foot-long spear had already carried along a dense aura of death to arrive nearby, and it intended to pierce through his body. Am I going to die? At the critical moment, Zhang Shouyang's heart shook, and the figure of his wife, Wang Chong, appeared in his mind at the first possible moment. Chong, if I'm reborn in the world, Zhang Shouyang's thoughts hadn't finished speaking when a brief sword howl instantly pierced into his eardrums, and it caused his mind to shake and the beautiful figure in his mind vanished, whereas, the grade 3 spirit spear that was about to penetrate to him was blasted to the side and pierced nothing but air. Who? Along with Kong Fang and Xiao Feng's grim shouts entering into his ears, Zhang Shouyang saw a familiar face appear before him, and it caused his eyes to light up. Brother Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian. When he heard Zhang Shouyang and saw the familiar violet-colored figure, Kong Fang's face went grim. If it was the young genius of another dynasty, perhaps the young genius wouldn't know Duan Ling Tian's strength, but Kong Fang had seen Duan Ling Tian make a move in the restaurant outside Skywolf Fort that day. At that time, Duan Ling Tian slapped his companion with a speed so swift that even caused him to feel ashamed for his inferiority. At that time, he understood that Duan Ling Tian was at least in existence at the second level of the void interpretation stage. Duan Ling Tian. Xiao Feng's pupils couldn't help but constrict. Never had he imagined that the young genius from the darkened dynasty that had been in the limelight 2 days ago would actually possess such a terrifying cultivation. He seems to be only 28, right? A casual strike of his sword blasted away the grade 3 spirit spear in Kong Fang's hand. In terms of strength, I'm afraid he isn't inferior to me. Such natural talent can be said to be heaven-defying. Big brother Zhang, aren't you too ferocious? Going against the joint forces of a first-level void interpretation stage martial artist and a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist with a cultivation at the first level of the void interpretation stage, only you can do such a thing. Duan Ling Tian completely disregarded Kong Fang and Xiao Feng as he smiled to Zhang Shouyang. Zhang Shouyang felt a wave of speechlessness when he heard this. Do you think I wanted to? If he knew since long ago that there was a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist amongst his enemies, he would have fled at the instant he killed that blue-clothed young man. If he fled at that time, Zhang Shouyang had the confidence to not allow Kong Fang and Xiao Feng to chase up to him. 793 Chapter 794, Instant Kill. Alright, we'll speak about other things later, the urgent matter at hand is to first deal with these unrelated people. Duan Ling Tian spoke to Zhang Shouyang as he turned around to look at Kong Fang and Xiao Feng. Presently, Kong Fang and Xiao Feng had already retreated into the distance, and their expressions instantly sank when they heard Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian actually called us as unrelated people. Zhang Shouyang nodded. The appearance of Duan Ling Tian caused his confidence to rise greatly, and he didn't have the intention of fleeing any longer. His burning gaze locked onto Kong Fang at the first possible moment. Brother Ling Tian, leave this fellow that uses a spear to me. Then leave the other one that's holding a lousy saber to me. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Lousy saber. Duan Ling Tian's words caused Xiaofeng to burst into rage, and he shouted out coldly. Duan Ling Tian, do you really think you can defeat me just because you were capable of stopping Kong Fang's attacks? Defeat you? Duan Ling Tian started laughing. Is it very difficult to defeat you? Kong Fang. Right when Duan Ling Tian and Xiaofeng were in confrontation, Zhang Shouyang had already attacked straight towards Kong Fang, and in a short moment, he'd already occupied an advantageous position in the battle. Before two people that possessed comparable ability, the difference of a few thousand ancient horned mammoths was still extremely large. So, Kong Fang was practically fighting Zhang Shouyang from a passive position. Xiaofeng. Kong Fang felt more terrified the more he fought, and he didn't doubt in the slightest that he would sooner or later be defeated by Zhang Shouyang if this continued, so he hurriedly sent a voice transmission to seek rescue from Xiaofeng. Xiaofeng's face sank when he heard this, and the origin energy on his body surged out before swiftly transforming into numerous material violet-colored lightning that coiled around his body. The great four-spirit saber in the hands of Xiaofeng, who was like a god of lightning that had descended to the world, shook, and this lightning saber, that was covered in bolts of lightning, seemed to be ready to attack at any moment. Instantly, 67 ancient horned dragon silhouettes and 4,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared in the sky above Xiaofeng. Besides that, another fierce aura soared from Xiaofeng's body and fused into the grade 4 spirit saber in his hands, and it emitted frightful coldness. Subsequently, another 3 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared in the sky above him. Third level elementary saber concept. At this moment, Xiaofeng didn't hold back in the slightest and utilized all of his ability. Not only had he completely exploded out with his strength at the second level of the void interpretation stage, the amplification of the grade 4 spirit saber was completely revealed as well. Besides that, he exerted the first level intermediate lightning concept and third level elementary saber concept. Once the grade 4 spirit saber in Xiaofeng's hand struck out, it would be comparable to the strength of 70 ancient horned dragons and 4,000 ancient mammoths. The strength of 70 ancient horned dragons. Duan Ling Tian was slightly surprised when he saw the phenomenon of the heavens and the earth that appeared in the sky above Xiaofeng, and then he said, I presume your strength can be considered to be at the top amongst the 10 young geniuses of the Darchu dynasty that have come this time. But Duan Ling Tian didn't continue speaking. Origin energy coiled and flashed on his body before finally transforming into strands of strong winds that twined around him, causing him to seem as if he'd transformed into a god of wind. In the sky, 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared before another 20 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared. Second level void interpretation stage. First level intermediate wind concept. Xiaofeng's pupils constricted slightly when he saw this scene. Even though he was mentally prepared since long ago, he still couldn't help but feel a wave of shock in his heart when he really saw Duan Ling Tian reveal a strength that wasn't inferior to him. How old was Duan Ling Tian? Yet how old was he? He knew that when he was at the same age as Duan Ling Tian, he wasn't even worthy of carrying Duan Ling Tian's shoes. Haha, good, good. Today, I, Xiaofeng, will enjoy the chance of kill a genius in the martial Dao like you. I presume it'll be the achievement I'm most proud of in my entire life. Xiaofeng grinned as the grade 4 spirit saber in his hand shook, causing the ancient horned dragon silhouettes in the sky to start surging. Obviously, he was already prepared to attack. But unfortunately, your dream can't come true. Duan Ling Tian's indifferent voice sounded out. At the instant Xiaofeng was stunned, he clearly saw that another 4 ancient horned dragon silhouettes had appeared in the sky above Duan Ling Tian. At the same time, strands of violet-colored energy had appeared in the material gale that swept around Duan Ling Tian's body, and there were faint sounds of lightning leaping about within it. Fourth level elementary lighting concept. Xiaofeng's pupils constricted. The concept Duan Ling Tian revealed now wasn't the slightest bit unfamiliar to him, and it was precisely the lighting concept that he comprehended primarily. This wasn't the end. Subsequently, he saw the phenomenon in the sky above Duan Ling Tian changed once more, and another 2 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared once more. These 2 ancient horned dragon silhouettes had appeared separately. First level elementary sword concept. First level elementary earth concept. Xiaofeng's expression finally went grim. Never had he imagined that not only had Duan Ling Tian comprehended void interpretation concept at such a young age to break through to the void interpretation stage, Duan Ling Tian had actually comprehended another 3 extraordinary concepts. Was this a natural talent and comprehension ability that ordinary human cultivators were capable of possessing? Xiao Feng doubted it deeply. Presently, Duan Ling Tian hadn't utilized a spirit weapon, yet the phenomenon of the heaven and earth already revealed 56 ancient horned dragon silhouettes that coiled down from the sky with an imposing aura that shot into the sky like a rainbow. Once Duan Ling Tian utilizes a spirit weapon, wouldn't his strength far surpass me? Xiao Feng was anxious. Duan Ling Tian, receive a strike of mine. Without the slightest hesitation, Xiao Feng struck out like a bolt of lightning with the intention of killing Duan Ling Tian and getting rid of all future troubles before Duan Ling Tian could withdraw a spirit weapon and accumulate force. But unfortunately, at the instant Xiao Feng attacked, Duan Ling Tian seemed as if he could predict it and dodged to the side. Whirlwind. Instantly, Duan Ling Tian seemed to have transformed into a gale that flashed about high above in the sky. At the same time that he stopped moving, a sword had appeared in his hand, and it was a sword that emitted a wave of terrifying aura. Whoosh! As soon as this sword entered his hand, the gale that twined around Duan Ling Tian's body instantly gushed into it. Instantly, another 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared out of thin air in the sky beside the existing 56 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. How can this be possible? The scene before him caused Xiao Feng's pupils to be unable to help but constrict. Amplification, an amplification of 100%. Duan Ling Tian was a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist, and when his origin energy exploded out completely, it was comparable to the strength of 30 ancient horned dragons. Presently, by relying on a sword, he'd obtained an amplification of the strength of 30 ancient horned dragons, and this caused Xiao Feng to have an expression of disbelief at the same time he felt exceedingly astounded. Even if it was a grade 1 spirit sword of legend, it would possess an amplification that was far less terrifying than this, right? Exactly what is this sword in Duan Ling Tian's possession? Xiao Feng was afraid, utterly afraid. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian had utilized all his ability, and 86 ancient horned dragons had appeared in the sky above him, whereas, there were only 70 ancient horned dragons and 4,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky above him. How was it possible to fight when the difference between them was almost the strength of 15 ancient horned dragons? Flee. Without the slightest hesitation, Xiao Feng raised his saber to hang above his head as the material violet-colored lightning on his body flashed out swiftly to envelop his entire body within an enormous, lightning saber. Ohm! The lightning saber tore through the sky and soared up with the intention of fleeing. Want to flee? The corners of Duan Ling Tian's mouth curled into a smile of disdain when he saw Xiao Feng wanted to flee, and the quasi-royal grade spirit sword in his hand shook as he executed the 9 dragons' radiant flash with his sword concept, and it transformed into 2 material divine dragons that chased up to Xiao Feng. Swoosh! Swoosh! The divine dragons charged into the sky with a speed so swift, they were even faster than Xiao Feng, who'd seemed to have transformed into a lightning saber, and they chased up to him in a short amount of time. Duan Ling Tian, spare me! Spare me! Xiao Feng obviously noticed the arrival of danger and hurriedly pleaded for mercy in a loud voice that revealed strands of misery, and it shocked Zhang Shouyang and Kong Fang, who were in a fierce battle to the point of temporarily stopping. Both of them looked up into the sky in unison when they heard this. Under their gazes, the eyes of 2 material divine dragons abruptly shot out 4 extreme flashes that instantly entered into the lightning saber that charged into the sky. In the next moment, the lightning saber shattered and a corpse plunged to the ground. Subsequently, they saw that when the 2 divine dragons dispersed in the air, a violet-colored figure had chased up to the corpse that was falling down in midair before blatantly taking the spatial ring on the corpse's hand. The corpse continued falling before vanishing within the illusory purgatory along with the grade 4 spirit saber in its possession. Brother Ling Tian, Zhang Shouyang was completely stunned as he looked at the violet-colored figure high above in the distant sky. Even though he was filled with confidence towards Duan Ling Tian, yet never had he imagined that Duan Ling Tian had killed Xiao Feng, who was at the second level of the void interpretation stage in only a short amount of time. How can this be possible? Kong Fang's face was ghastly pale as he looked at the violet-clothed figure in the distance with an expression of disbelief. Even if Duan Ling Tian was a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist that possessed a grade 3 spirit weapon to rely on, it was impossible for Duan Ling Tian to kill Xiao Feng in such a short period of time. Could it be that he's a third-level void interpretation stage martial artist? Suddenly, a thought that even he felt was absurd arose in Kong Fang's heart, yet once this thought arose, it was impossible for him to suppress it any longer. Earlier, after Duan Lingtian withdrew the quasi-royal grade spirit sword and utilized his entire strength to kill Xiaofeng, he'd put away the spirit sword right away, whereas, the 86 ancient horned dragon silhouettes in the sky had vanished along with this and wasn't seen by Zhang Shouyang and Kong Fang. So they utterly didn't know exactly what had happened earlier. Bang! Outside the inscription formation that formed the illusory purgatory, a corpse that held a grade 4 spirit sword fell down and fiercely plunged onto the combat arena. Xiaofeng, the representative of the Darchu dynasty, went grim in expression when he saw this person, and he cried out in shock. Xiaofeng. Instantly, a nearby representative of a dynasty looked at the representative of the Darchu dynasty with surprise. He's your Darchu dynasty's Xiaofeng. Supposedly, this Xiaofeng was already a first-level void interpretation stage martial artist 1 year ago. Xiaofeng already broke through to the second level of the void interpretation stage 3 days ago. The representative of the Darchu dynasty spoke with a gloomy expression. What? Instantly, the representatives of the various dynasties that had aloof expressions because the matter was of no personal interest to them revealed expressions of disbelief. Even a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist has been killed. 794. Chapter 795, Colluding. After all, up until now, most of the young geniuses of the various dynasties that were killed in the illusory purgatory were only at the void initiation stage, whereas, void interpretation stage martial artists couldn't be counted on one's hands, and all of them were martial artists at the first level of the void interpretation stage. Yet now, a second-level void interpretation stage martial artist was killed, and it caused the representatives of the various dynasties to feel slightly perturbed. Up until now, a total of 35 people have died, another 9 people have to die before the remaining 50 people will be able to smoothly pass the first round of the selections and walk out from the illusory purgatory. Many representatives muttered to themselves and felt deep anxiety. Within the illusory purgatory, when facing Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang by himself, Kong Feng didn't even dare have the thought of fleeing. Unknowingly, the cloth behind his back had already been completely drenched by cold sweat. Big brother Zhang, want me to do it for you? Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Kong Feng as he spoke to Zhang Shouyang, and his words caused Kong Feng's face to go ghastly pale. No, Zhang Shouyang shook his head as he dashed out to charge towards Kong Feng once again. Swoosh! The gourd tore through the sky and descended with overwhelming might, causing Kong Feng's face to darken as he hurriedly blocked with the 7-foot-long spear in his hand. But unfortunately, because Xiaofeng had been killed and Duan Lingtian who killed Xiaofeng was standing nearby, Kong Feng's mind was in chaos, and he was utterly unable to exert his full strength. After 15 minutes passed, Kong Feng was finally heavily injured under Zhang Shouyang's continuous attacks. Bang! The wine gourd descended from the sky like a mountain that pressed down from the sky and smashed Kong Feng to death. After Kong Feng died, Zhang Shouyang took away Kong Feng's spatial ring and grade 3 spirit spear before stomping onto Kong Feng's badly battered head and utilized the repulsive force to flash to Duan Lingtian's side, whereas, Kong Feng's corpse instead sped up as it flashed down and completely vanished from the illusory purgatory. Brother Lingtian, Zhang Shouyang passed the spatial ring and grade 3 spirit spear to Duan Lingtian, yet was refused by Duan Lingtian. Big brother Zhang, what are you doing? These are your spoils from the battle and have nothing to do with me. If it wasn't for you, I'd have been killed by them since long ago. So how could I possibly obtain these spoils from the battle? Take it, Zhang Shouyang spoke resolutely. In the end, Duan Lingtian took the grade 3 spirit spear only. I can still return this grade 3 spirit spear to the cauldron and refine it once more to refine a spirit weapon with a higher quality. As for the spatial ring, you keep it, big brother Zhang. After he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian flashed forward. Zhang Shouyang kept away the spatial ring helplessly before following up to Duan Lingtian. I wonder how many people have died up until now, but, based on the time, at least more than 30 people have already died. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but guess on the way. I wonder where Su Li and young Miss Tian Wu are, said Zhang Shouyang. So long as they don't encounter those figures from the other dynasties that are difficult to deal with, then they ought to be fine with their strength. Even though he spoke like this, Duan Lingtian was still slightly worried in his herd. Su Li was fine as he possessed a cultivation at the second level of the void interpretation stage, so he possessed the strength to protect himself. Even though Feng Tianwu possessed a fire spirit body, and her natural talent and comprehension both far surpassed ordinary people, but she was still too young after all. Moreover, she was only at the first level of the void interpretation stage, so there were many people that were capable of defeating and even killing her. In the illusory purgatory, even if one died, one would have died for nothing. Because unless someone had witnessed the scene with their own two eyes, otherwise, no one would know who was the one that killed a certain person. If something really happens to Tian Wu, then once Uncle Feng goes mad, I'm afraid he'd kill everyone besides the few of us who have a good relationship with Tian Wu. If something happened to Tian Wu, Duan Ling Tian believed that Feng Wudao would absolutely not stand idly by, and he would surely avenge Tian Wu like a madman. Even though Feng Wudao always revealed a serious appearance before Feng Tian Wu, it was precisely because of this that Duan Ling Tian was able to deeply feel the fatherly love Feng Wudao had for Feng Tian Wu. It was a selfless fatherly love, a fatherly love that made him able to give everything for the sake of his daughter. Feng Wudao would even be willing to give up his own life for the sake of Feng Tian Wu, and this was something Duan Ling Tian didn't doubt in the slightest. Let's go. Duan Ling Tian's figure flashed as he sped up to flash forward. He wanted to find Tian Wu as soon as possible, because he was worried something unexpected would happen if he was too late. Zhang Shouyang followed closely behind him. An hour passed, yet Duan Ling Tian and Zhang Shouyang hadn't met a single young genius from the various dynasties all along the way. 2 hours passed. Duan Ling Tian. Right when Duan Ling Tian and Zhang Shouyang were continuing forward, they suddenly heard a grim shout sound out from afar. This voice wasn't unfamiliar to Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian stopped moving, and his fierce gaze directly flashed towards the source of the voice. It's him. Zhang Shouyang stopped along with Duan Ling Tian before looking over, and when he saw the figure that was approaching gradually, his brows couldn't help but raise because he'd recognized this person. This person was similarly a young genius that had come from the Darken dynasty to the ancient desert city to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, just like himself and Duan Ling Tian. Zishang. But when he thought of this person's unfathomable secret technique, Zhang Shouyang's pupils constricted gradually, and he had an expression of fear. After a short moment, when he recalled that the Duan Ling Tian who could undo Zishang's secret technique was just by his side, Zhang Shouyang heaved a sigh of relief and returned to normal. As for Duan Ling Tian, his eyes were suffused with pleasant surprise when he saw Zishang, and then they flickered with traces of cold lights. If he were to say who was the person he wanted to kill the most after entering the illusory purgatory, then it would be Zishang without a doubt. I was originally worried that I'd be unable to encounter Zishang, yet never had I imagined that he would come looking for me himself. It's truly an effortless search. But in next to no time, Duan Ling Tian noticed that Zishang was actually approaching directly towards him, and a brilliant smile clearly suffused Zishang's face. Duan Ling Tian saw the piercingly cold lights in Zishang's eyes clearly, and this caused him to be unable to help but be slightly bewildered. Zishang is actually not fleeing after seeing me. Logically speaking, he knows that the Devilseal tablet in my possession is capable of suppressing the soul in his body that seems to belong to a martial emperor stage expert, so he ought to not dare fight me head-on. Could it be that he obtained some sort of fortuitous encounter during this short 1 year of time? Duan Ling Tian guessed in his heart. Duan Ling Tian, we ought to end everything between us, and this end will be done here. Zishang spoke indifferently. Looks like you're extremely confident of yourself. I wonder where you're getting his confidence from. Duan Ling Tian started laughing. I presume you're extremely clear about where my confidence comes from. You, Duan Ling Tian, ought to be unable to utilize that illusory realm soul skill in this place, am I right? Zishang sneered. Looks like that old fellow that's concealed in your body isn't a simple figure, he actually knows that I'm unable to utilize soul skills here. Duan Ling Tian's eyes slowly narrowed, yet he wasn't so surprised. If the owner of the strand of incomplete soul in Zishang's body was really a martial emperor stage expert in the past, then even if he wasn't an inscription master, he would surely have a certain level of understanding towards inscriptions. Because even if it was a martial emperor stage expert, once the expert entered a soul suppression formation constructed by an inscription master that possessed a spiritual force that was stronger, the expert would similarly be unable to utilize any abilities via spiritual force. But, even if I can't utilize soul skills here, do you think you're a match for me? After all, I have something that can counter that old fellow, and he can't help you, said Duan Ling Tian. He'd long since detected Zishang's current cultivation, and it was only at the first level of the void interpretation stage. If Zishang didn't have the assistance of the incomplete soul that seemed to belong to a martial emperor stage expert, it would be impossible for Zishang to defeat him. Zhang Shouyang stood at the side and was puzzled as he listened to the conversation between Duan Lingtian and Zishang, and he was utterly unable to discern what exactly the two of them were saying. Illusory realm soul skill, old fellow, he knew nothing about it. HMPH. Zishang grunted coldly. Do you think I have to make a move myself to kill you? Zishang's words caused Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang to be unable to help but be stunned. Whoosh! Right at this moment, a swift figure flashed out from behind a faraway precipice, and it arrived to stand by Zishang's side in the blink of an eye. Zishang, I truly never imagined that you have someone that can counter you. No wonder you didn't kill me earlier and gave me a favor instead. So it turns out that it's for the sake of dealing with Duan Lingtian. The person that arrived spoke to Zishang as he looked at Duan Lingtian. Lu Yang. Duan Lingtian's face sank as he never imagined that Zishang would collude with Lu Yang. If he were to say which young genius in the illusory purgatory he didn't have any certainty in obtaining victory against, then Lu Yang would undoubtedly be one of them. After all, he was unable to utilize his soul skill, Thousand Illusions, here. Lu Yang, the Darming dynasty's crown prince, was a martial artist at the third level of the void interpretation stage. Even if he only comprehended first-level void interpretation stage concept, his strength would far surpass Duan Lingtian after it was amplified by a spirit weapon. Even though he had the high-grade heaven rank offensive martial skill, 9 Dragons Radiant Flash, to rely on, but as a third-level void interpretation stage martial artist and the crown prince of the Darming dynasty, Lu Yang had surely cultivated a heaven rank martial skill. Even if his 9 Dragons Radiant Flash was more formidable than the heaven rank martial skill cultivated by Lu Yang, but Lu Yang's strength was far from something Duan Lingtian was capable of shaking. So he didn't have the slightest certainty when going against Lu Yang. Lu Yang, don't underestimate Duan Lingtian, it's only because we're here. If it was in the outside, then perhaps you wouldn't even have touched the corners of his sleeve before being killed by him, said Zishang. I know, our Darming dynasty's Zhao Weiyi has already suffered a loss at his hands. Lu Yang nodded as his eyes stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian, and icy cold lights flickered within. Duan Lingtian, you caused trouble in my Darming dynasty's capital a few months ago and humiliated the young geniuses of my Darming dynasty before causing the death of the Zhao clan's elder Kun. I'll properly get even with you for this today. As Lu Yang spoke, the origin energy on his body swept out and abruptly shot into the sky before enveloping his entire body within it, causing him to transform into a great ball of flames. 795. Chapter 796, Heaven-Defying Luck. Whoosh! Phenomenon of the heavens and the earth appeared abruptly in the sky above Lu Yang, and numerous lifelike ancient horned dragon silhouettes condensed into form. First, 40 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared before another 30 condensed into form. Third level of the void interpretation stage. Second level intermediate fire concept. That wasn't the end. Along with strands of material azure energy and violet energy leaping about within the flames, another 5 and 3 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared successively. Fifth level elementary wind concept. Third level elementary lightning concept. A total of 78 ancient horned dragon silhouettes coiled down aggressively from the sky, and it brought out a type of visual impact to others. This strength was still before the Darming dynasty's crown prince, Lu Yang, utilized a spirit weapon. Whoosh! With a raise of his hand, a fan made of unknown materials appeared out of thin air in his hand, and the fan only possessed a frame and the leaves that covered it. Along with the flames on Lu Yang's body gushing into the fan was enveloped by a layer of flames and transformed into a flaming fan that ceaselessly flickered with scorching flames. The energy of the heavens and the earth roiled once more in the sky as a group of ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared, and if one looked closely, they totaled at 27. Besides these 27 ancient horned dragon silhouettes, another 2,000 ancient horned mammoth silhouettes had appeared. The strength of the third-level void interpretation stage when completely exploded out is comparable to the strength of 40 ancient horned dragon. An amplification of 27 ancient horned dragons and 2,000 ancient mammoths, the spirit fan in Lu Yang's possession is a grade 3 spirit weapon that's capable of providing a 68% amplification. Duan Lingtian saw through the ability of the spirit fan in Lu Yang's hand in the first possible moment. Duan Lingtian wasn't surprised that Lu Yang possesses a grade 3 spirit weapon like this. At any rate, Lu Yang was the crown prince of the Darming dynasty, so how could he possibly not possess a grade 3 spirit weapon to rely on? The strength of 105 ancient horned dragons and 2,000 ancient mammoths, Duan Lingtian's pupils couldn't help but constrict as he looked at the phenomenon of the heavens and the earth above Lu Yong. With Lu Yong's strength, not to mention he'd only comprehended first-level intermediate wind concept, even if he'd comprehended second-level intermediate wind concept, it would still be impossible for him to be a match for Lu Yong. Amongst all the young geniuses of the various dynasties that I know of up until now, perhaps only Zishang is capable of defeating Lu Yong after he's possessed by the incomplete soul within his body that seems to belong to a martial emperor stage expert. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but recall that Lu Yong had said Zishang didn't kill him when he'd just made an appearance earlier. Obviously, Lu Yong had fought Zishang, and Zishang ought to have allowed the incomplete soul to possess his body, allowing him to defeat Lu Yong with overwhelming might, yet he didn't kill Lu Yong. Of course, it wasn't because Zishang was merciful that he didn't kill Lu Yong, but was instead because he wanted to use Lu Yong to deal with Duan Lingtian. How scheming of Zishang! Duan Lingtian's expression completely darkened as he looked at Zishang, and his eyes flickered with a fierce light that seemed like it was waiting for a chance to swallow Zishang up. At this moment, he even more urgently wanted to kill Zishang. So long as Zishang wasn't eliminated, Zishang would sooner or later turn into a great calamity. What, want to kill me? After he noticed the gaze filled with killing intent that Duan Lingtian shot over, he revealed a brilliant smile on his face. But unfortunately, you don't have the chance, you're bound to die here today at the hands of Lu Yong. If you have another lifetime, then remember this properly, don't offend me, Zishang. I, Zishang, am not someone that you, Duan Lingtian, can afford to offend. As he finished speaking, beamed cheerfully, and he seemed as if he'd already seen the scene of Duan Lingtian being killed by Lu Yong. Zishang, are you so sure that Lu Yong can kill me? A talisman appeared out of thin air in Duan Lingtian's right hand, and it was precisely one of the 3 talismans that his father had given him that day, and he'd utilized one in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom in the past. That talisman killed the void transformation stage expert of the Darken Dynasty's imperial family. Presently, only 2 of these talismans remained in his possession. Truthfully speaking, he didn't want to utilize the talisman on Lu Yong, as even though Lu Yong was the Darming Dynasty's crown prince, as far as he was concerned, Lu Yong wasn't worthy of him using the talisman. It was no ordinary talisman, but a talisman that caused even void transformation stage experts to be killed instantly when facing it. The unwillingness in Duan Lingtian's heart to utilize this talisman on a mere 3rd-level void interpretation stage martial artist was obvious. Never mind, after I kill Lu Yong, Zishang will be unable to escape death. Using a single talisman in exchange for their lives, even though I'm still suffering a loss, I'll be able to protect my life at any rate. Duan Lingtian consoled himself ceaselessly, otherwise, he was really worried that he wouldn't be willing to throw out the talisman in his hand and annihilate Lu Yong. HMPH. Stop deliberately being mystifying. Lu Yong, kill him. Zishang regarded Duan Lingtian's words as beneath his notice, and he shouted out with a light voice. Lu Yong's gaze locked onto Duan Lingtian at the first possible moment when he heard this, and then his entire body seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that flashed directly towards Duan Lingtian. Brother Lingtian, watch out. Zhang Shouyang's face went grim as he shouted out explosively. Even though he knew he was far from being a match for Lu Yong, yet he still took out his gourd and intended to stop Lu Yong. You're courting death. Zishang grunted in a low voice as killing intent arose in his eyes, and then his entire body seemed to have transformed into a ruthless wild beast that pounced towards Zhang Shouyang in a flash. Whoosh! When facing Lu Yong, who approached menacingly, Duan Lingtian raised his hand that held the talisman, and he intended to toss out the talisman and directly annihilate Lu Yong. Right when he was about to toss out the talisman, he felt the scene before his eyes shake, causing him to instinctively grab tightly onto the talisman in his hand, and he didn't throw it out. At the same time, the scene before his eyes went black, as if the entire heavens and earth had suddenly undergone some sort of unusual movement. Haha, I never imagined that my luck was so good. In this instant, Duan Lingtian completely came to a realization, and he understood what had happened. Right when Duan Lingtian's delighted thoughts had just arisen within his mind, an expanse of light arose before his eyes, and he'd appeared in the sky above a vast combat arena. We've come out. Duan Lingtian revealed a brilliant smile as he casually put away the talisman in his hand. Duan Lingtian naturally knew what had happened when he saw everything before him. When Liu Yong made a move against him with the intention of killing him and he intended to toss out the talisman to annihilate Liu Yong, the 44th person had been killed within the illusory purgatory. Since 44 people had been killed and 50 remained, it also meant that the first round of the selections had come to an end, whereas they would be sent out from the illusory purgatory formed from the inscription formation in a timely manner, and this also allowed him to save an extremely precious talisman. This luck of mine is simply heaven-defying. Even though he wasn't able to kill Liu Yong and Zishang, yet Duan Lingtian didn't feel the slightest bit regretful. So long as he left the illusory purgatory, his spiritual force wouldn't be restricted any longer, and he was able to utilize his soul skill, Thousand Illusions, as he pleased. Now he was completely capable of killing both Liu Yong and Zishang without the talisman. Ha 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 ha, after a short moment, Zhang Shouyang's loud laughter resounded out, and it was filled with joy. Obviously, he'd realized what had happened as well. Originally, he'd already held the thought that he would die without a doubt, yet at the critical moment, a scene like this had occurred, and it caused him to have no choice but to sigh with emotion about their luck. Of course, the reason he would think like this was because he utterly didn't know that Duan Lingtian had another way to kill Liu Yong. Zishang and Liu Yong appeared nearby, and after feeling a wave of confusion, they realized what had occurred, causing their faces to go grim. You got lucky. The icy cold gaze that Zishang shot out flashed past Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang as he grunted coldly. If I knew earlier, I'd have attacked earlier. If I'd attacked as soon as possible, it would be impossible for Duan Lingtian to survive. Liu Yong sighed and felt slightly regretful. Liu Yong knew that since they'd left the illusory purgatory, it also meant that Duan Lingtian could utilize his illusory realm's soul skill. According to the information he obtained from Zishang, once Duan Lingtian utilized that illusory realm soul skill against him, then the outcome will surely be one of no survival for him. We've come out, haha, we've come out, comma. Meanwhile, the groups of young geniuses that had appeared out of thin air in the sky above the combat arena with Duan Lingtian had started laughing, and some even lost their composure and starting cheering. The time they experienced within the illusory purgatory was simply like a form of torture to them, as they were worried if they would encounter an existence stronger than them and be killed at every single moment. Now, they'd come out and had survived through the first round of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Moreover, they'd obtained the qualifications to advance and participate in the second round of the selections. But in next to no time, the group of young geniuses that were cheering seemed to have noticed something, and all of them seemed as if their throats were choked tightly and were unable to make the slightest sound any longer. The numerous corpses that lay on the combat ring ceaselessly impacted their eyes and caused them to feel a wave of horror. Just like them, these people were living people before entering the illusory purgatory, yet now, while they'd come out from the illusory purgatory still alive, the others had become numerous icy cold corpses. Many of these people were their friends and companions, and it was precisely the death of these people that won a chance for them to survive. Suddenly, the sky above the combat arena was deathly silent. Yi Xiao, Bai He, Bai Hao, all of them died. Duan Lingtian looked at 4 corpses that were piled up together, and they were 4 of the 10 young geniuses that came from the darkened dynasty this time. 3 of these people were existences with extraordinary strength, and they weren't unfamiliar to Duan Lingtian. The Yi clan's eldest young master, Yi Xiao, the darkened dynasty's imperial family's second prince, Bai He, and the young prince Bai Hao. I never expected that even Bai Hao would die. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but gasp. He knew of Bai Hao's strength, and it was extremely outstanding. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Bai Hao to obtain the third in the dynasty martial competition of the Darkened Dynasty 1 year ago. Only Zishang remains amongst the members of the imperial family, all the blood relatives of the emperor have died. I presume he isn't feeling well. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but look at the Darkened Dynasty's emperor. At this moment, the face of the Darkened Dynasty's emperor was extremely gloomy, and his eyes were even suffused with a scarlet red color. 796 Chapter 797, Wishful Thinking. Duan Lingtian could understand the feelings of the Darkened Dynasty's emperor. The emperor's most outstanding son and the nephew that was even more outstanding than his son had died just like that, and they'd died far from home. This was indeed something that was difficult to accept. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed that after the Darkened Dynasty's emperor took a deep breath, his expression recovered to normal, and his face actually revealed a smile when he looked towards Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, congratulations. At the same time, the Emperor's voice transmission that was filled with an intention of congratulating entered into Duan Lingtian's ears in a timely manner, and it caused Duan Lingtian to feel his entire body become slightly cold. It was said that emperors are heartless, and today, he could be considered to have completely understood it. Perhaps in his eyes, if his son died, he could give birth to another, whereas, his nephew didn't matter even more. To him, the most important thing was the benefit the Darkin dynasty could obtain during the martial competition of the 10 dynasties this time. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Amongst the 50 people that had survived the first round of the selection, the Darkin dynasty occupied 6 of these positions, causing it to be firmly ranked at the front amongst the 10 dynasties. Whoosh, whoosh. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang returned to the area where Feng Wudao, Sword 13, and Saber 5 stood, whereas, Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Long Yun were already standing in the air there since long ago. Big Brother Duan, Big Brother Zhang. When Feng Tianwu had just come out from the illusory purgatory and returned to Feng Wudao's side, her gaze had searched urgently for a trace of Duan Lingtian, and she only heaved a sigh of relief after she saw Duan Lingtian was completely unharmed. Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang nodded, and then Zhang Shouyang ridiculed. Young Miss Tianwu, you didn't see it in the illusory purgatory earlier, Brother Lingtian was looking for you extremely anxiously. Big Brother Zhang. Duan Lingtian didn't expect that Zhang Shouyang would sell him out in the blink of an eye, and he instantly glared angrily at Zhang Shouyang. Feng Tianwu's beautiful face flushed bright red when she heard this, and it seemed as if blood would drip out from her face. I and young Miss Tianwu encountered each other early on, and we didn't encounter any formidable enemies. So after we killed a few people, we concealed ourselves at the side and waited for the first round to end. Su Li said with a smile, I saw both of you coming out together. Could it be that you encountered each other in there? Yes. Zhang Shouyang nodded, and then he heaved a sigh of relief with a slight lingering fear in his heart. Both of you were lucky, I and Brother Lingtian were almost killed by Zisheng and Lu Yang. The expressions of Feng Tianwu and Su Li couldn't help but darken when they heard Zhang Shouyang, and Su Li said with a frown, how did Zisheng come to collude with Lu Yang? Even if they joined forces, they might not be a match for Big Brother Duan, right? Feng Tianwu had a certain level of understanding towards Duan Lingtian's strength. Brother Lingtian seemed to be unable to execute that secret technique that's capable of confusing his enemies in there. Zisheng could be disregarded, as Brother Lingtian had a method to counter Zisheng's secret technique, and even if he didn't utilize the secret technique, Brother Lingtian wasn't afraid of him. But once Lu Yang exerted his full strength combined with the strength amplified from his grade 3 spirit weapon, it was comparable to the strength of 105 ancient horned dragons. I and Brother Lingtian wouldn't be a match for him if we went head-on against him. Zhang Shouyang spoke with slight fear. Then what happened in the end? Feng Tianwu's expression went slightly pale when she heard this. Even though she knew Duan Lingtian had already tided over the difficult situation, yet she still broke out in cold sweat for Duan Lingtian in her heart. As for Duan Lingtian, who was the concerned party, he instead stood at the side with a calm expression. He knew clearly in his heart that even if he and Zhang Shouyang weren't sent out of the illusory purgatory in time, they would still be fine. The talisman in his possession was sufficient to easily annihilate Lu Yang. At this moment, no matter if it was Su Li or Long Yun, or even Feng Wudao, Sword 13, and Saber 5, all of them couldn't help but look at Zhang Shouyang. Obviously, they were all curious about what happened next that allowed Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang to tide over that dangerous situation. In the end, Zhang Shouyang suddenly started laughing, and he laughed brilliantly. In the end, when Lu Yang made a move against Brother Lingtian, the scene before our eyes went black, and then we were sent out of the illusory purgatory. Everyone was dumbstruck when they heard this. Even that can happen. This luck of yours, Su Li felt speechless towards Duan Lingtian and Zhang Shouyang's luck. Duan Lingtian. Suddenly, a sonorous voice broke the clamorous atmosphere at the scene, and it caused the scene to become quiet, whereas, the owner of the voice became the center of an attention. The Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master, Ning Kan. The gazes of everyone descended onto Ning Kan, and some of the people even faintly guessed what Ning Kan wanted to do. Looks like Vice Fort Master Ning really wants to take Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple. Duan Lingtian is really lucky. Once he becomes the personal disciple of Vice Fort Master Ning, he'll be completely capable of walking unhindered in Skywolf Fort, the ancient desert city, and even the area around the ancient desert city. Many young geniuses from the 10 dynasties that had survived the first round of selections looked at Duan Lingtian with envious gazes. HMPH. The corners of Sword 13's mouth curled into a wisp of a cold smile, and he seemed to be ridiculing Ning Can for not knowing his limitations. Since the beginning, he'd repeatedly declared that Ning Can didn't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple, and Sword 13's words had even indicated that it was impossible for Duan Lingtian to take Ning Can as his master. Vice Fort Master Ning, do you have any comments? Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Ning Can and spoke frankly. Before the first round of the selections began, I promised that once you passed through the first round of the selections and no matter what method you utilize to pass through it, you can become the personal disciple of Ning Can. Ning Can spoke slowly. And then, Duan Lingtian yawned and asked with a slight lack of interest. Ning Can frowned when he saw Duan Lingtian's attitude, yet he still said with a low voice, "Now, Ning Can, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, intend to take you, Duan Lingtian, as my personal disciple. From today onwards, the Skywolf Fort will foster you into greatness with its full strength, whereas you must give everything to the Skywolf Fort, including your life." When he finished speaking, Ning Can said indifferently, "All right, you can kneel down and carry out the formalities of taking me as your master." From the beginning until the end, Ning Can was putting on a one-man show, and he didn't even ask Duan Lingtian's opinion. Moreover, as he finished speaking, he even asked Duan Lingtian to kneel down and carry out the formalities of taking him as master. It was as if he utterly didn't think that Duan Lingtian would refuse him, whereas most of the people present didn't think that Duan Lingtian would refuse. As far as they were concerned, taking Ning Can as master was only beneficial and not harmful in the slightest. So, Duan Lingtian didn't have any reason to refuse. Vice Fort Master Ning. Right when the gazes of everyone descended onto Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Ning Can. "You seem to have not understood something, right?" Ning Can frowned as his expression sank slightly. Could it be that Duan Lingtian is really going to refuse me? For the beginning until the end, your wish of asking me to take you as my master seemed to only be your own wishful thinking, right? You first asked me to take you as my master, and under the circumstances of not even asking for my opinion, you brazenly asked me to kneel down and conduct the formalities of taking you as my master, yet I wonder, where did you get such great confidence from? Are you sure I wouldn't refuse? When Duan Lingtian spoke up to hear, he glanced deeply at Ning Can, and his eyes contained a slight mocking expression. Not to mention Ning Can's tone of superiority from the beginning caused him to be extremely annoyed. Even if Ning Can begged him to take Ning Can as his master, he wouldn't be willing. It was just as Sword 13 had said, a vice fort master of a mere third-rate sect of the foreign lands truly didn't possess the qualifications to be his master. He, Duan Lingtian, possessed the memories of the 2 lifetimes experienced by the rebirth martial emperor when he came to the foreign lands. As far as he was concerned, only those experts that stood at the peak of the Cloud Continent, martial emperor stage experts, had the qualifications to be his master. A mere old fellow that hadn't even stepped into the martial monarch stage dared talk nonsense before him and wanted to take him as a disciple. Truly laughable. Duan Lingtian's truthful words caused most people present to break out in cold sweat for him. Has Duan Lingtian gone mad? He actually dares to brazenly refuse Vice Fort Master Ning, and he didn't hold back with his words in the slightest, nor did he leave any room for discussion. Don't forget that he has the experts of the Blade sect by his side to support him. Many people whispered in discussion. Duan Lingtian is simply looking for death. Zishang revealed a cold smile. Never had he imagined that Duan Lingtian would actually openly go against the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Can. After all, this was the territory of the Skywolf Fort. Perhaps the Blade sect wasn't inferior to the Skywolf Fort, yet as the saying goes, a mighty dragon is no match for a serpent in its home. Sword 13 might not be able to protect Duan Lingtian in Skywolf Fort. What exactly does Duan Lingtian want to do? The Darken Dynasty's emperor was slightly going crazy. He'd led the young geniuses of the Darken Dynasty to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties precisely for the sake of the Skywolf Fort's rewards. He seemed to have already seen innumerable Grade 3 spirit weapons, Grade 3 medicinal pills, and even concept fragments arriving in his possession when the Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master Ning spoke out with the intention of taking Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple. But at the critical moment, Duan Lingtian's words were like a bucket of cold water that was poured over his head, and it caused him to sober up completely. At the same time that he sobered up, traces of coldness arose in the heart of the Darken Dynasty's emperor. Could it be that Duan Lingtian doesn't know he's representing our Darken Dynasty now? If he infuriates Vice Fort Master Ning, then our Darken Dynasty will have a hard time as well. Swish, 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 comma. Numerous gazes descended in unison onto Ning Can, whose expression flickered between a livid and ashen expression and was angered to the point he was infuriated to the extreme. On the other hand, Feng Wei, who stood by Ning Can's side, abruptly took a step forward, and his icy cold and bone-piercing gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian as he said in a low voice, "Duan Lingtian, my martial uncle wants to take you as personal disciple because he thinks highly of you. Don't be ungrateful. Vice Fort Master Feng, according to what you said, if I want to take you as a personal disciple, it's also because I think highly of you." Duan Lingtian wasn't afraid of Feng Wei in the slightest as he calmly met Feng Wei's gaze and spoke word by word. "Who do you think you are to dare compare yourself with my martial uncle? You." Feng Wei's eyes were filled with extreme rage as he spoke coldly. But he hadn't finished speaking when he was stopped by the nearby Ning Wei with a raise of his hand. Ning Wei's gaze that didn't contain any emotion descended calmly onto Duan Lingtian. "All right, then I'll ask you, are you willing to take me as your master?" 797 Chapter 798, 8th Level Fire Concept Fragment. Vice Fort Master Ning, I'm truly sorry, I'm not willing. Under the gazes of everyone present, Duan Lingtian spoke out unhurriedly to answer Ning Can's question. For a time, many people present felt their scalps go numb. Duan Lingtian really dares to refuse him. Good, good, good. Ning Can took a deep breath and spoke the word, good, 3 times in succession before finally asked in a low voice. In this way, you've already taken Sword 13 as your master. As far as her was concerned, since Sword 13 had repeatedly said that he didn't have the qualification to take Duan Lingtian as his disciple, then there would surely be a reason. The most likely reason was the Sword 13 had already taken Duan Lingtian as his disciple. Ning Can. Duan Lingtian hadn't spoken yet when Sword 13 had already looked at Ning Can. You wouldn't be thinking that I've taken Duan Lingtian as my disciple earlier, and that's why I ridiculed you as not possessing the qualification to take Duan Lingtian as your disciple, right? HMPH. Ning Can grunted coldly, and he obviously admitted it in an implied manner. Then I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. I, Sword 13, feel that I'm just like you and don't possess the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as a personal disciple either. Sword 13 continued. Whoosh. Sword 13's words was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, and it caused everyone present to go into an uproar. Sword 13, an expert from a power of the foreign lands, the Blade sect, that wasn't inferior to the Skywolf Fort, and an existence that was on equal standing with these 2 Vice Fort Masters of Skywolf Fort, had actually openly said that he didn't possess the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as a disciple. Who was Duan Lingtian? A young genius from a mere dynasty, so on what basis was he able to make Sword 13 speak words like this? Besides Su Li, most of the people felt deeply perplexed. Only Su Li knew extremely clearly about what his master was thinking in his heart. Because the reason his master would speak like this was entirely because he'd told his master about Duan Lingtian's background. Just like him, Duan Lingtian was from an kingdom that was beneath an imperial kingdom that was beneath an empire that was beneath the Darken Dynasty. A kingdom was the smallest subordinate power that was of the lowest level and most remote amongst the subordinate powers of the Darken Dynasty. Not to mention the foreign lands, even if it was the Darken Dynasty, that tiny little kingdom was no different than a remote village in the eyes of the Darken Dynasty. Yet it was precisely a young man from a remote village that had moved step by step to traverse a path of his own and possess his current shocking strength. According to Sword 13's guess, there seemed to only be 2 types of possibilities to explain why Duan Lingtian was able to possess such accomplishments in such a short period of time. The first, Duan Lingtian possessed a master of extraordinary origins, and his master ought to be an expert that possesses terrifying strength. The second, Duan Lingtian didn't possess a master, and he'd relied on himself and the various fortuitous encounters he'd obtained to arrive at his current accomplishments. No matter which possibility it was, as far as Sword 13 was concerned, Ning Can didn't possess the qualifications to be Duan Lingtian's master. Because even if Ning Can had taken Duan Lingtian as his disciple while Duan Lingtian was young, Duan Lingtian might not be able to possess his current strength. Moreover, according to his knowledge, Duan Lingtian also possessed a secret technique that was utilized with spiritual force, and it was an ability that even martial monarch stage experts might not be able to come into contact with. Not to mention Ning Can, even a martial monarch stage expert was unable to teach Duan Lingtian this. I truly never imagined that you, Sword 13, would give such a high evaluation to a little kid. Ning Can laughed coldly, yet his expression had eased up slightly. To a certain extent, Sword 13's words could be considered to have given him a way out. After he glanced indifferently at Duan Lingtian, Ning Can didn't say anything further because he knew that no matter what he said, he would only bring insult to himself. Of course, in his heart, he wished for nothing more than to tear Duan Lingtian into pieces before burning Duan Lingtian's bones and scattering his ashes. But he knew that for the sake of the Skywolf Fort's face, and because of the presence of Sword 13 and Saber 5 who were experts from the Blade sect that he was afraid of, he didn't dare act rashly. In his eyes, Duan Lingtian was only an ant, and it wouldn't be too late even if he waited for the martial competition of the 10 dynasties to end before thinking of a way to kill Duan Lingtian. Moreover, who could guarantee that Duan Lingtian would be able to survive in the later selections of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties? The first round of the selections has ended. Gather here tomorrow morning as well, and at that time, I'll lead all of you towards the place where the second round of the selections will be held. Ning Can looked around at the remaining 50 young geniuses and spoke slowly. As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body had vanished on the spot, and he'd left. HMPH. Feng Wei's gaze that was filled with killing intent flashed towards Duan Lingtian as he snorted coldly, and then he brought along the personal disciple he'd just taken today, Lu Yong, and left to enter the inner fort of Skywolf Fort. Most of the young geniuses from the 10 dynasties couldn't help but reveal expressions of envy as they looked at Lu Yong's disappearing figure. The representative of the Darming dynasty this time, the Zhao clan's Zhao Qian, revealed a rare trace of a smile on his face. The crown prince of their Darming dynasty being able to become the personal disciple of the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort was utterly beneficial to their Darming dynasty. Wei Yi, properly display your ability in the following selections, you might have a chance to take the other fort masters of Skywolf Fort as a master. Based on the current situation, Vice Fort Master Feng is only an ordinary Vice Fort Master, and even Vice Fort Master Ning has a higher status than him. After Elder Qian noticed that Zhao Weiyi's expression was gloomy, he guessed what Zhao Weiyi was thinking, so he consoled. Moreover, don't forget that the one with the highest position in Skywolf Fort isn't those Vice Fort Masters, but is instead the elusive Fort Master. Zhao Weiyi's dim eyes finally contained a glow when he heard this, and his face contained an extra sense of resolution. But when his gaze accidentally descended onto the distant violet-clothed young man, his expression couldn't help but darken. The violet-clothed young man wasn't unfamiliar to him and had even caused him to suffer deep humiliation. To him, when the violet-clothed young man used an unfathomable and peculiar ability to defeat him in the 9th floor of the Ice Flame Pavilion that day, it was the greatest humiliation he's suffered in his entire lifetime. When he recalled how the violet-clothed young man had refused to take Vice Fort Master Ning as master, his expression became even more unsightly. The Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Can, that Duan Lingtian disdained to take as his master just happened to be someone he wanted to take as his master even in his dreams. For a time, an indescribable bitterness arose in his heart. At this instant, he suddenly felt that Duan Lingtian, who was already ahead of him, seemed to have thrown him even further into the distance, and it caused him to be unable to catch up. Could it be that I, Zhao Weiyi, will be unable to defeat him and wash away the humiliation I suffered for my entire life? No, I'm not resigned to this fate. Zhao Weiyi roared endlessly with unwillingness in his heart. I truly never imagined that one day has passed just like this. Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the sunset glow in the horizon. Day and night couldn't be distinguished within the illusory purgatory, so he was unable to sense the change in time. Unknowingly, an entire day had already passed during the first round of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties selections. Let's go have dinner. Duan Lingtian looked at the group of people by his side and suggested. At the same time, Duan Lingtian was deeply afraid that Sword 13 would refuse, so his gaze directly descended onto Sword 13. Senior, come with us as well. Unexpectedly, Sword 13 didn't refuse, and it was even to the extent that even Saber 5 and Long Yun had come along to have food, causing Duan Lingtian to feel speechless. Is the skin of this pair of master and disciple so thick? After Duan Lingtian's group left, the representatives and young geniuses of the various dynasties in the sky above the combat arena finally made a move. Some of them helped the elders of Skywolf Fort clear up the corpses on the combat arena, while the remaining people either headed out of Skywolf Fort or headed towards the pavilions Skywolf Wolf arranged for them. On exactly what basis did that Duan Ling Tian obtain such a high level of acknowledgement from that expert of the Blade Sect? Yes, that expert from the Blade Sect is obviously an expert at the same level as Vice Fort Master Ning and Vice Fort Master Feng, yet he actually said that he doesn't possess the qualifications to take Duan Ling Tian as his disciple, and it's truly unbelievable. Perhaps the Blade Sect expert is intentionally being mystifying. Duan Ling Tian that had become known well by all the representatives and young geniuses of the various dynasties 2 days ago had once again become the center of their discussions. Skywolf Fort, Inner Fort. Martial Uncle, Duan Ling Tian was so presumptuous before you today. Could it be that you're going to let it go like that? In a vast courtyard, Feng Wei frowned as he looked at Ning Can. Ning Can's eyes narrowed as a strand of cold light flashed past his eyes. Then what do you think I should do? Kill him directly, not to mention that Sword 13 will stop me. Even if I really kill him, what would the people outside say about me? They would say the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Can, wanted to take a young man as his personal disciple, but he turned angry from embarrassment because the young man refused him, then he used his might to bully and kill the young man. As he finished speaking, Ning Can snorted coldly. Could it be that we're going to just let this matter go? Feng Wei's eyes flickered with a cold light, and he said with an unwilling expression, he undoubtedly looks down at our Skywolf Fort by treating Martial Uncle like that. I'm not willing to let him off like that. Let him off? Impossible. Ning Can sneered. Martial Uncle, what you mean it? Feng Wei's eyes lit up and he couldn't help but ask curiously. Don't forget that there are still another 3 rounds of selection in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Go tell that personal disciple you just accepted that so long as he's able to kill Duan Ling Tian and help me vent my anger, I'll give him an 8th level fire concept fragment. Said Ning Can. 8th level fire concept fragment. Feng Wei couldn't help but gasp when he heard Ning Can. Even though he'd given a 3rd level fire concept fragment to his personal disciple, yet there was a difference like the difference between the heavens and the earth between it and the 8th level fire concept fragment in his martial uncle's possession. A 3rd level fire concept fragment was only capable of assisting a martial artist that had comprehended fire concept to advance swiftly until the 3rd level of advanced fire concept. After the martial artist comprehended 3rd level advanced fire concept, the 3rd level fire concept fragment would transform into powder and vanish. Cultivation after that would require the martial artist to rely on the martial artist's own comprehension, or perhaps rely on finding another fire concept fragment of an even higher level. On the other hand, an 8th level fire concept fragment was sufficient to allow a martial artist that had comprehended fire concept to swiftly attain the state of 8th level advanced fire concept within a short period of time. Even if it was in the Skywolf Fort, there were very few 8th level advanced concept fragments. 798 Chapter 799, Colluding Again. Never had Feng Wei imagined that his martial uncle would actually take out the 8th level fire concept fragment he'd kept for a long time for the sake of killing Duan Ling Tian. At this moment, Feng Wei deeply felt his martial uncle's hatred towards Duan Ling Tian, and it was hatred that came from within the bones. Don't worry martial uncle, I'll tell Yang. Feng Wei's gaze flashed, and he felt happy in his heart for the personal disciple he'd just taken. After all, an 8th level fire concept fragment wasn't so commonly seen. An 8th level fire concept fragment came from a void transformation stage expert that had comprehended 8th level advanced fire concept, and a void transformation stage expert like this was usually in existence at the 7th level of the void transformation stage or above. If one wanted to obtain an 8th level fire concept fragment, then one had to either wait for an existence like this to die from the depletion of lifespan, or kill an existence like this. Thus, it was obvious how difficult to come by an 8th level fire concept fragment was. In next to no time, Feng Wei had returned to the courtyard he lived in, and the personal disciple he'd just taken was arranged to stay within a room in this courtyard. Young, Feng Wei cried out as soon as he entered. Master. There was a total of 3 rooms in the courtyard, and a person walked out from the leftmost room before looking at Feng Wei with respect and reverence. It was the Darming dynasty's crown prince, Liu Yang. Even though Liu Yang was a supreme crown prince in the Darming dynasty, yet this place was the Skywolf Fort, and it was a formidable power of the foreign lands that could annihilate the Darming dynasty by casually sending out an elder with deep cultivation. He didn't dare put on any airs before a power of the foreign lands like this. Haha, Yang, come, master has something to tell you. Feng Wei called Lu Yong over before going straight to the point. You ought to have seen how Duan Lingtian treated your martial ancestor, right? Yes. Lu Yong nodded, and he couldn't help but feel slightly afraid when he recalled the scene he saw in the outer fort not too long ago. Even though he didn't hope for Duan Lingtian to take that martial ancestor as master, because once Duan Lingtian took Ningkan as master, he would be inferior by Duan Lingtian in seniority for his entire lifetime and had to call Duan Lingtian martial uncle. But never had he imagined that Duan Lingtian would actually be so audacious, and not only had Duan Lingtian directly refused his martial ancestor, Duan Lingtian's words didn't leave any room for discussion. Master, what do you want to tell me? Lu Yong asked curiously. Feng Wei didn't beat around the bush and directly spoke of what Ningkan had told him. So long as you're able to kill Duan Lingtian during the martial competition of the 10 dynasties this time, your martial ancestor will give you an 8th level fire concept fragment. 8th level fire concept fragment. Lu Yong gasped as greed instantly suffused his eyes. However, this greed quickly vanished and a wisp of a bitter smile suffused his face. Feng Wei had noticed the changes in Lu Yong's expression from the beginning until the end, and he couldn't help but be stunned when he saw Lu Yong reveal a bitter smile. Master. Lu Yong sighed. Actually, I was almost able to kill that Duan Lingtian during the time we were within the illusory purgatory, but unfortunately, right when he was about to die at my hand, the illusory purgatory sent us out. His luck is so good. The corners of Feng Wei's mouth twitched, and he felt disbelief towards Duan Lingtian's luck, then said, don't worry, there'll still be a chance later on. Later on, Lu Yong shook his head. Master, there's something you don't know, Duan Lingtian isn't a simple figure. I heard from Zisheng that came from the Darkened Dynasty just like Duan Lingtian. Subsequently, Lu Yong spoke of everything Zisheng had told him about Duan Lingtian's illusory realm soul skill. Illusory realm soul skill, soul skill. Feng Wei's pupils constricted, and he revealed an astonished expression. Are you sure it's a soul skill? Besides variants and demon beasts that possess extraordinary natural talent, how can a human martial artist possibly execute a spiritual force technique similar to soul skills without becoming a martial emperor? Impossible. It's absolutely impossible. As the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, Feng Wei understood soul skills extremely well, and he knew that it was an ability of variants and demon beasts that possessed extraordinary natural talent. Even though human martial artists were also capable of utilizing spiritual force techniques similar to soul skills, yet they had to break through to the martial emperor stage before being capable of utilizing it. When I heard Zisheng speak of this matter, it didn't seem to be fake, Lu Yong continued. Even if it was now, when he recalled the strand of black-colored flame brand that appeared between Zisheng's brows and the strength capable of completely crushing him that suddenly exploded out from Zisheng, he still couldn't help but feel a slight lingering fear in his heart. At that time, if Zisheng really wanted to take his life, then he would be dead for sure. So he felt that Zisheng had utterly no reason to deceive him. This Zishan you mentioned is a member of the Darkened Dynasty. You were acquainted with him before this? Feng Wei frowned. I got to know him in the illusory purgatory. Lu Yong laughed bitterly. Illusory purgatory? You didn't kill him? Feng Wei was stunned. Kill him? Lu Yong stared blankly for a moment before laughing bitterly. Master, I wanted to kill him, but the problem is I'm utterly not a match for him. What? You're not a match for him? Feng Wei was shocked slightly. There's someone stronger than you in the Darkened Dynasty. Lu Yong nodded, and then asked. Right, Master, there's something I want to ask you. Do you know why a black-colored flame brand would appear between a person's brows? Moreover, after this black-colored flame brand appeared, the person's strength would instantly rise greatly. Black-colored flame brand? Feng Wei frowned. What's that? Lu Yong continued. Master, Zisheng was originally only a first-level void interpretation stage martial artist and wasn't a match for me, but when a strand of black-colored flame brand appeared between his brows, he instantly possessed a strength comparable to the 5th level of the void interpretation stage and caused me to be unable to even fight back before him. A first-level void interpretation stage martial artist instantly possessed a strength at the 5th level of the void interpretation stage. A black-colored flame brand appeared between his brows. Feng Wei's frown grew even deeper, and then he guessed. Could it be a secret technique? I don't know. Lu Yong shook his head. Looks like I have to meet Zisheng. You go call him over, said Feng Wei to Lu Yong. Yes. Lu Yong replied and left. In a restaurant near Skywolf Fort, Duan Lingtian's group were sitting around a table and enjoying fine wine and good food. After being hungry for an entire day, everyone was immersed in eating and drinking voraciously. Before long, the fine wine and delicacies on the entire table were swept clean. After eating their fill and Duan Lingtian paying the bill, their group left the inn and soared up into the sky with the intention of returning to Skywolf Fort. Suddenly, Sword 13 and Saber 5's figures stopped moving as they turned around to glance at the side of the restaurant, and when they didn't notice anything unusual, the two of them continued forward. After Duan Lingtian's group left, an aged figure walked out from the shadows at that place when Saber 5 and Sword 13 glanced at earlier. Duan Lingtian, you got lucky. I don't believe that Sword 13 will be able to follow by your side at all times. The old man's eyes emitted a gleam of hatred as he gnashed his teeth. The old man was the patriarch of the Dongguo clan, Dongguo Lei. For the sake of finding a chance to kill Duan Lingtian with a single blow, he'd always been laying in ambush outside the Skywolf Fort while waiting for a chance, and even though Duan Lingtian had finally come out today, he didn't have a way to make a move. The expert of the Blade Sect, Sword 13, had always been following by Duan Lingtian's side, and he was utterly unable to find a chance to make a move. Could it be Dongguo Lei? Even though the actions of Sword 13 and Saber 5 were brief, yet it was still noticed by Duan Lingtian, who possessed an extremely great observational ability, and he couldn't help but guess in his heart. Within the ancient desert city, it was undoubtedly the Dongguo clan's patriarch Dongguo Lei that would want to take his life, whereas, now that he suspected someone was observing them from the shadows, he guessed that the person was most probably Dongguo Lei. It's easy to dodge a strike in the open, yet an arrow from the shadows is difficult to avoid. Dongguo Lei will eventually become a great trouble if he isn't killed. Duan Lingtian pondered in his heart on the way back. But, Dongguo Lei was a 6th-level void transformation stage martial artist after all, and there was only one way he could take to kill Dongguo Lei, and that path was to utilize the talisman his father had left behind for him. However, only 2 of those talismans remained, and if it wasn't a necessity, he was really unwilling to utilize them. Never mind, I won't take the initiative to go against him. But if he really comes looking for me, then even if I have to utilize a talisman, I'll still kill him to get rid of any future troubles. Duan Lingtian resolved in his heart. Isn't that Lu Yong? Suddenly, Zhang Shouyang's voice entered into Duan Lingtian's ears, and it caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but look along his gaze, and Duan Lingtian noticed that Lu Yong was heading towards a pavilion. Isn't that the pavilion Zisheng resides in? Feng Tianwu's beautiful brows slightly knit together. After a short moment, Duan Lingtian's group saw that after Lu Yong stood in the sky outside a pavilion for a short moment, a figure shot out from within the pavilion and converged with Lu Yong. Zisheng. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as extremely cold lights flickered within his eyes. If this wasn't the Skywolf Fort and attacking others was prohibited strictly, otherwise, he'd wish for nothing more than to charge up and directly kill Zisheng now. Lu Yong brought Zisheng to the inner fort. What do they want to do? Zhang Shouyang frowned when he saw Lu Yong and Zisheng swiftly entering the inner fort, and he spoke with a slightly worried tone. As far as he was concerned, nothing good would come from these 2 fellows being together. Lu Yong, do you know why Vice Fort Master Feng is looking for me? Zisheng asked Lu Yong after they entered the inner fort. It's mainly for the sake of asking you about Duan Lingtian's illusory realm martial skill. My martial ancestor wants me to kill Duan Lingtian during the later selections of the martial competition, and he didn't spare to give out an 8th-level fire concept fragment for this, said Lu Yong. 8th-level fire concept fragment? Zisheng's gaze lit up brightly and a sheen of greed flickered faintly within his eyes, yet it quickly died down. What a pity. Zisheng, actually, there's always been something that I've been curious about. Exactly what is Duan Lingtian using to counter you? After all, you're completely capable of instantly killing him with the strength you possess after the flame brand appears between your brows. Lu Yong had always been puzzled by this, and he was always unable to wrap his head around it. 799 Chapter 800, a variant, innate ability. Even though he'd vaguely discerned from the conversation between Duan Lingtian and Zisheng in the illusory purgatory today that Duan Lingtian seemed to be capable of countering Zisheng, yet he didn't know how Duan Lingtian countered Zisheng. Zisheng glanced indifferently at Lu Yong, yet didn't say anything. What a joke, he wasn't stupid to the point of revealing his weak point. Lu Yong seemed to have discerned the deep meaning within Zisheng's gaze and he smiled embarrassedly while gesturing to Zisheng. Let's go, I'll take you to see Master. Zishang met the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, Feng Wei, once again in a spacious courtyard. Vice Fort Master Feng. Zishang nodded lightly to Feng Wei, and it wasn't very warm. Even though Feng Wei was the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, and Feng Wei was a supreme existence to him now, yet since that strand of incomplete soul had resided within his body, he knew that even an existence at the 7th level of the void transformation stage or above was still like an ant before a true expert. On the other hand, the future of he, Zishang, was far from something a mere void transformation stage could restrain. He was an existence that would become a martial monarch and even a martial emperor. You're Zishang. Feng Wei's face sank instantly when he saw Zishang actually revealing such an arrogant attitude when facing him. Whoosh! Instantly, a terrifying aura swept out from him to press onto Zishang, and he wanted to make Zishang lower his arrogant head. But unfortunately, he quickly noticed that Zishang seemed to have utterly not felt his aura, and from the beginning until the end, Zishang had a calm expression and was looking at him with a spurious smile. Instantly Feng Wei's face sank, and he didn't hold back any longer, urging out his strongest aura to sweep out with the intention of making Zishang bend his body. Regretfully, no matter how his aura swept out like waves of a violent storm, Zishang still remained firm as a rock. Vice Fort Master Feng, don't waste your strength, let's get to the point. Zishang spoke impatiently. A mere void transformation stage martial artist wanted to suppress him with his aura. He wasn't a single person now after all, and there was another formidable soul hiding within his body. Even though it was only a strand of an incomplete soul, yet it wasn't something the aura of a mere void transformation stage martial artist could suppress. Zishang. Right when Feng Wei's eyes revealed killing intent, Lu Yong's expression went grim as he glared at Zishang. Please be respectful when you're talking to my master. Respect. Zishang glanced indifferently at Lu Yong and ridiculed with disdain. Lu Yong, are you even worthy of speaking about respect with me? If I knew earlier that you weren't capable of killing Duan Lingtian in the illusory purgatory today, I'd absolutely not have let you off. Good, very good. Feng Wei glanced deeply at Zishang as he suppressed the flames of rage in his heart and said in a low voice, I heard from my disciple that after a black-colored flame brand appeared between your brows, your strength would rise explosively. And it would instantly rise from the 1st level of the void interpretation stage to the 5th level of the void interpretation stage. As he finished speaking, Feng Wei's eyes revealed an expression of greed. If I'm not wrong, you ought to have executed some sort of secret technique, right? Secret technique? Zishang was stunned before laughing with disdain. I know you won't admit it, but I advise you to obediently hand over that secret technique, otherwise, this day next year will be the day of your anniversary. Feng Wei completely shed all pretenses, and a terrifying killing intent arose from him to sweep towards Zishang. In next to no time, Feng Wei was stunned. Because he noticed that Zishang's expression didn't change in the slightest when facing his killing intent, and it was as if Zishang was fearless. Aren't you afraid of death? Feng Wei's face sank. No one is unafraid of death. Zishang shook his head. Then why are you so composed when faced with imminent death? Feng Wei asked with a low voice. The reason I'm composed is because I firmly believe that Vice Fort Master Feng won't kill me, because once you kill me, not only will you be unable to obtain that secret technique you guessed about, you'll even be unable to obtain a treasure that's easily within your reach. Zishang spoke confidently. Stop trying to deceive me. Feng Wei grunted coldly. If I'm not wrong, the reason Vice Fort Master Feng looked for me is mainly for the sake of finding out about Duan Lingtian's ability, right? Actually, now that I speak of it, we're on the same boat with regards to dealing with Duan Lingtian. All of you want Duan Lingtian dead, and I want him dead as well. Zishang spoke frankly. You're very intelligent, but compared to killing Duan Lingtian, I'm more interested with the secret technique you possess. Feng Wei glanced deeply at Zishang. Secret technique? Zishang started laughing. Vice Fort Master Feng, if you think that I know some sort of secret technique, then you're sorely mistaken. Cloud Continent is extremely huge. Besides ordinary martial artists and a variety of demon beasts, Vice Fort Master Feng ought to have heard of variants, right? Variants. Feng Wei's pupils couldn't help but constrict when he heard this. Even though he'd never seen the variants of legend with his own 2 eyes, yet he'd seen introductions related to these variants from some books of unusual topics. Variants were the product of the union between humans and demon beasts, and the probability of them being born was low to the extreme. In Cloud Continent, so long as a demon beast broke through to the void transformation stage, the demon beast would be a demon, that could take human form and be no different from an ordinary human. Moreover, after these demons took human form, many of them would unite with humans and give birth to children. Normally speaking, the union of humans and demons would either give birth to pure humans or pure demon beasts. But there were also exceptions. Supposedly, there was a 1 in 10,000 chance that a variation would occur, and this variation was the extremely rare variance of Cloud Continent. Variants were divided into two types, and they belonged to two extremes. One type was mediocre, and their natural talent and comprehension ability was even far inferior to their parents, whereas the other type possessed extremely heaven-defying comprehension ability and natural talent, and this type of variant could be a human or a demon beast. Both of them had a similarity, and that was they both possessed a type of extremely terrifying ability. This ability was something they possessed innately, causing it to be unique and impossible to replicate. According to rumor, this ability was called an innate ability. What you mean is, you're a variant. Moreover, this ability of yours that can increase your strength in a short period of time is your innate ability. When Feng Wei looked at Zisheng once more, his pupils slightly constricted, and his voice was filled with astonishment. After all, variants and innate abilities were all something he'd seen in books, and he'd never encountered it in reality. I never imagined that Vice Fort Master Feng is so knowledgeable to actually know about the innate ability of his variants. Zisheng smiled extremely brilliantly. Of course, he sneered in his heart instead. Actually, even he didn't know what variants were, nor did he know what an innate ability was a moment before this. All of this was something Ghost Flame, who hid in his body, had taught him to say, and it was only for the sake of deceiving the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort before him. Of course, no matter if it were variants or innate abilities, they really existed according to Elder Ghost, only Zisheng wasn't one. Since you said you're a variant, then I really want to witness your innate ability. Feng Wei stared at Zisheng with a burning gaze. What he wanted to do the most at this moment was to confirm whether Zisheng's ability was a secret technique or an innate ability. If it was a secret technique, it would surely possess a side effect, and he would be able to perceive it, whereas, innate abilities were abilities that variants possessed innately, and it wouldn't have any side effects. As you wish, Zisheng nodded. In the next moment, the origin energy in his body surged and caused the energy of the heavens and the earth to roil, and then it converged into 20 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. First level of the void interpretation stage. In next to no time, a small black dot started to appear between Zisheng's brows, and the small black dot swiftly expanded after it appeared before transforming into a black-colored flame brand in the end. Right at this moment, Feng Wei's gaze that looked towards the phenomenon of the heaven and earth above Zisheng had changed slightly. The phenomenon of the heavens and earth had instantly undergone a tremendous change, and another 50 ancient horned dragon silhouettes had instantly appeared at the side of the existing 20 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. With mere origin energy, it was comparable to the strength of 70 ancient horned dragons. It was precisely the sign of a 5th-level void interpretation stage martial artist. Time silently passed by. After half an hour passed, the black-colored flame brand between Zisheng's brows withdrew gradually, and the additional 50 ancient horned dragon silhouettes in the sky above him gradually dispersed, causing the raging origin energy on his body to withdraw by more than half. As for Zisheng himself, his face still remained calm, and one couldn't perceive that his actions from earlier had caused any side effects. Lu Yong, who stood at the side, couldn't help but gasp. Half an hour. Never had he imagined that Zisheng was actually capable of maintaining a state of being at the 5th level of the void interpretation stage for half an hour. After all, after Zisheng exploded out with the strength at the 5th level of the void interpretation stage that day, he was crushed in the blink of an eye, and he was pressed down by Zisheng's strength to the point he wasn't even capable of fighting back. It's really an innate ability. Feng Wei's pupils constricted as after he saw that there were no side effects present on Zisheng's body, he'd believed Zisheng's words. I truly never imagined that I, Feng Wei, would actually be able to see a rumored variant in my lifetime. It's truly a stroke of luck. Besides that, the innate ability of legend is actually so terrifying. It's able to allow a 1st-level void interpretation stage martial artist to increase his strength to the 5th level of the void interpretation stage for a short period of time. Feng Wei sighed, and then he thought of something and asked. According to my knowledge, even the innate ability of a variant requires the consumption of spiritual force. Does your innate ability have any restrictions? It can only be sustained for almost an hour every day. Zisheng was prepared for this since long ago, and he answered calmly. Almost an hour every day. The pupils of both Feng Wei and Lu Yong constricted at the same time, and they couldn't help but curse aloud at the same time. Freak. Zishang, could it be that Duan Ling Tian is a variant as well? Suddenly, Feng Wei seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but ask. I heard Yang say that you said Duan Ling Tian is capable of executing soul skills. According to my knowledge, unless a human martial artist breaks through to the martial emperor stage, otherwise, it would be impossible for a human martial artist to execute an ability similar to a soul skill.